right, everybody, welcome to the final One Up Yours special GDC edition, and we're going for a more traditional form show today, although it's only 2 segments. But it's still going to be all about GDC. We're going to wrap it all up. This is Garnet Lee. Joining me is a most auspicious cast, including Mr. Shane Bettenhausen.
I'm still here.
Wow, that's enthusiastic. And Brian Indahar.
I'm here.
He's here also.
I'm ready to rock.
And then we have 3 guests with us today from What They Play, the Lord and Master of all things that they play.
I think he's more of an Earl.
Earl, the Earl of playing, Mr. John Davison.
Hello.
Sporting a very snazzy orange shirt with all kinds of...
It's a Space Invader.
Spectacular. Oh,
It's from Threadless.
Garnet,
that's
it's
pretty
radio.
cool.
Yeah.
Well, no, it's not. It's video, see?
There's video, too.
See, it's video.
orange.
There's a
Threadless.
camera right there.
Big fun.
Speaking of cameras, from the MTV multiplayer blog, Mr. Steven Totillo. He of Patrick Klepek Thievery.
Yes, I am holding him hostage.
Are you gonna shear him and make a wig?
You're going to get a note from him and kind of like cut out newspaper headlines.
I don't know.
asking for
Share
help.
him. This is starting to sound very sexual.
And there he is, Mr. Nguy Kroll, the established leader of guest appearances on the One of Yours podcast.
Does he have more
How many
guest
times have you
appearances?
done it now?
I think this will be the 4th, so
wow.
I guess that makes me the Steve Martin of One of Yours.
Excellent. So there we go. So what we're going to do is we're going to do a kind of first segment, what you've been playing, what you've been seeing, GDC, just complete smorgasbord. Who knows what it'll be, but that'll be that thing. And then in the second segment, Andrew has very generously spent the afternoon pulling together all of the good GDC-related news items that we'll kind of throw out there, do the One Up Yours treatment to, and then we're gone, and next week we go back to normal, and with a big sigh of relief. All right, so we're going to kick it off. What was the highlight of your GDC, Nguy?
Well,
well,
we just got off a panel on media that was called Up Against the Wall, Game Creators Take on the Press.
okay, you can't use your own panel as the one.
I heard you had a very special guest on that panel.
We did. One of Yours very own, his own goddamn show, Garnet Lee,
Yes.
was on the panel, as was Steven Totillo.
Yeah, I think Brian was talking about me, actually.
I like that.
He was, yes.
I actually was, but
I thought he was talking about Brian Crescente, so I don't know.
Brian Crescente, Jeff Keighley, Andy McNamara. Did I leave anyone out, or did I get everyone? I think that was it.
A veritable who's who.
So it was interesting, mainly because I guess the person who probably felt the most in the hot seat, because what I did was I solicited questions from the actual developers. I wanted to know what they wanted to know and pose the question to the panel. I think it was probably Garnet and Andy Mac, because it seemed that all the developers wanted to know about was reviews. And Steven, who, despite being younger than me and is just much smarter and wiser, he suspected before I got the questions back that was what the developers were going to be most interested in. I assumed that they might have much loftier thoughts about the state of game journalism and what things they wanted to see and this, that, and the other. And a lot of the questions were directed at reviews.
The developers were not interested in any Lester Banks speculation at all.
How can I assure a green score on Metacritic?
So, like, what? I mean, we weren't
too.
there. I mean, what were some of the big interesting questions about reviews?
Steven, were there interesting questions?
Oh, boy.
I mean, I think the questions were sort of what you would have expected. People are saying, can you get rid of a reviewer if they give a bad review, or would you get rid of a reviewer if they were overwhelmingly negative?
Consistently
Jeff
negative.
was in the front row, by the way.
Jeff
Gerstmann. Absolutely, Jeff was in the front row.
And he was named in the question.
Right, and to which there was an interesting exchange, though, because Andy McNamara was kind of put on the hot seat for this question, and somebody else then turned around on him and said, well, because he said we would never fire anybody for their opinion, and somebody might have been Jeff Keighley said, well, what if your reviewer gave Halo 3 a 2? Or it might have been Crescenti who said that. I can't remember. But would that have been a problem? Would you stop that person? How could you possibly give Halo 3 a 2? If somebody did that, wouldn't that be grounds for some sort of, I don't know, termination, but something? And he said no. He said you can't. Every opinion is valid. And they kind of left it there. It actually would have been interesting for there to be a little more follow-up on that one, I think, because
It didn't go any further than that?
No.
I gave a fairly long answer to that.
There were some things that went low. I mean, Jeff Keighley sort of raised the point, which I think is valid, is that there's this implicit assumption that game reviews are objective. And so that, or at least there's a range of scores that each game deserves. And so if it falls outside that range somehow, then the review itself must be called into question. And it's not that, I mean, people who work in the game industry aren't stupid. Developers aren't stupid. They understand that it's opinion. But I think there's this feeling that somehow, and Jeff was sort of raising the specter, is why is it that in other media it's assumed it's just the opinion, and it could be wildly at variance, and there isn't an idea that this movie deserves this score. But there's a feeling that in games that like there may be a range of score that certain games or many games deserve.
Right. I mean, I guess the follow-up that I was expecting to be asked, or that I would ask myself if there had been time, is that you can say that every opinion is valid, but that still begs the question, but if the opinion that you are paying your reviewer to provide is one that just seems consistently out of whack to you, then surely logically you would not have that person be the one representing your publication or your website or whatever. So while everybody may have a valid opinion, some of those opinions maybe are not the ones you want out there as an editor. And so where do you draw that line? And that's what I was really hoping that he could have illuminated.
I also think it's a point of assigning someone, the right person, the right review. Like, you're not going to put someone who hates first-person shooters on a Halo 3.
Garnet made that point.
Did you guys...
Yeah, I had to make that point because I had to defend the idea of someone giving a 2 to Halo 3 because of the hypothetical situation that was set up. Because, yeah, I mean, sure, if they built the right argument, you would defend them because that's an extreme. But you should never have the guy who wants to give Halo 3 a 2 on the review in the first place. It just doesn't...
But what that highlights is there's institutional reviews versus personal reviews. I mean, did you go into that? Because if it's very clearly Garnet thinks this game is this score, then you have someone to vent at. But if it's EGM says that it's this, then it's a completely... Right. Then you're into this institutional, and it's like... The sort of the notion that every opinion is, completely sacred is different depending on which approach you take.
Right, you get into the whole Super Paper Mario, or rather, Paper Mario 1000 Year Door Game Informer review issue, where I think the reviews they gave the game were like 6.5 or something like that.
6.75.
Right, and then the defense of on the reviewer's part, when there was some heat on him for that, was saying, well, we gave the review that we thought our audience would be, would be accepting of because we don't think that our audience would be into this. And that's clear. But personally, the reviewer is saying, I like the game, but that's not the score I was going to give. I mean, that goes to your point, John, is that reviewer at the time was not just sort of standing up and saying, well, this is how I feel, and that's how I'm going to be represented here.
And that's
Sorry, go on.
I was going to say that's a challenge when you compare games to other media. I mean, games are like other media, but not exactly, so you have to use the right analogy at the right time. So when Garnet was saying what he's saying about, like, well, you wouldn't assign, Halo 3 to someone who doesn't like first-person shooters, if we were to sort of compare that to movies, and would you say that someone who maybe isn't that into romantic comedies doesn't get the review? I mean, Roger Ebert reviews everything for the Chicago Sun-Times, and maybe he tries to be a little more sort of open-minded about everything, but the fact of the matter is, in other areas you wouldn't cut someone off or sort of say, like, that person can't review this thing because they don't like that genre or haven't liked examples in that genre. Yeah,
I mean, I think what you're hitting at is that there's some immaturity amongst the folks that do this professionally, in that they want to play their favorites.
But I'm not saying immaturity, though, simply because that's what I'm saying. Like, it's not a perfect analogy because the challenge is in games there's certain things that are more specialized. Like, I mean, everyone can understand a romantic comedy.
Film, books, music. It's a passive. It's a passive experience, whereas like reviewing a game is like reviewing an automobile, kind of.
It's like being able to speak
there's some
language.
There's some foreknowledge involved and some expertise involved.
Right.
Whereas like anybody can watch 27 Dresses, Brian, and know if they like it or not.
Did you like it, Brian?
I actually have not seen
what?
that.
You love chick flicks.
But I will be going seeing definitely maybe. I'm sure my wife will be dragging me to that.
Well, to close out the review thing, did everyone see the fuss today about Maxim's review of the new Black Crowes album? No. There was a story. Gorka actually picked it up because the record label did not send any pre-release copies of the new Black Crowes album out, and Maxim reviewed it and gave it 2.5 out of 5. So when the label called the reviews editor there to say, dude, what the fuck? They were like, well, it was either make an educated guess on what it was like or not cover it at all. So what would you rather do?
And they've done that. Maxim, I think, I don't want to get it wrong, but I think Maxim, but let's just say a men's magazine, did that with a game as well.
It's routine. And like apparently PR people don't mind it because it's press.
So we could do that right now. Super Mario Smash Brothers Brawl. It's got a lot of characters in it. The graphics are a bit better than the last one. It's okay. There you go.
Yeah, it's pretty good.
Reviewed. Done.
There you go. Done.
Yeah.
Well, I think that game's out already in Japan.
Oh, you're so tricky.
But for those people for whom may feel this conversation is a little highbrow, the most exciting thing I did was not my panel, but I played Still Alive in Rock Band.
Oh, the cake. The
Yeah.
cake is not a lie song.
Yeah, the song from the end credits for Portal. So
In Rock Band.
in Rock Band. So
By the way, I just want to point out that Shane also believes the cake is not a lie.
I actually haven't finished Portal, so I don't really know.
Because it's what he just said, so
Yeah.
continue.
all right, thank you. So I can't really say why I was meeting with Harmonix. I think a number of people met with Harmonix. They've got something that's going to be unveiled shortly that's pretty cool. But the byproduct of being there was we were able to play Still Alive by Jonathan Colton in Rock Band. I got on the drums. Jeff Keighley was on lead guitar. Ricardo Torres from GameSpot was on bass, and one of the Harmonix people was on vocals. And I hate to call people out, but Ricardo failed us out.
Oh.
So
You saved him, though, right?
We saved him, but he failed 3 times.
Oh.
So we had to kick him off
Ouch.
and replace him with another person from Harmonix, and we heroically and valiantly made it through the song Cake at the end. It was exciting.
Cake at the end. All right, Steven, how about you? What was the best thing you saw, or most exciting thing you saw at GDC?
Well, there was one tech demo that I liked a lot. Everybody's talking about the tank tech demo that they had for PlayStation 3 with the iToy.
Oh, that was really cool, though. You would draw little shapes and it would make it into a tank.
Yeah.
I mean, they
and,
showed that stuff on their blog site
Yes.
a while ago, but still, I mean, I know they had
With
an
dudes
updated
streaming
one,
over
right?
to the desk. This is where we had guys streaming over the desk and dropping stuff on the underneath the camera, and they were like making those into tanks.
But they had a head tracking one, and I know people have seen head tracking before, but I've actually never done it myself. And the last time I'd seen head tracking was there was this guy in Pittsburgh a couple months ago who put up this video of himself strapping a Wii remote to his head, and then he had kind of this thing on his TV screen, which is basically a black background and then a few red and white targets, like archery targets or what have you. And with the Wii remote strapped to the top of his head and his sensor bar under his TV, the sensor bar could detect how he moved his head. So when he would kind of lean to the left or lean to the right as if he was looking around a corner or kind of moving out of the way of something coming at him, the targets would begin to shift like one was moving behind the other. So the effect is as if you were looking around the corner. The screen isn't
cool.
static. You're seeing behind things. But it involved this whole contraption of the remote on his head and whatnot. And what Sony had was a much more elegant setup. Just an
6
iToy.
axis on your head?
Yes.
6 axis on your head, yes.
Actually, in your teeth. You just put the iToy, the PlayStation Eye, up, and it's running a special proprietary program. But I just stood in front of it. It recognized my face, distinguished that from my shoulder or anything else.
Does a quick retinal scan.
Yeah, it could tell that I was who I said I was. And then it was actually, also trying to recognize other people's faces behind me, but it recognized that I was the main person standing in front of it. It kind of locks onto your face, and then at first, therefore, it's just kind of a reflection of who's standing in front of the TV. That goes away. The screen goes black. The targets appear, and then as you move your head, again, you're seeing around things. And they said, you can imagine this in first-person shooters or sort of any other game where you want to be able to just lean a little bit and see around something. And it was cool to see them pulling this off with just the the PlayStation Eye, and it seems like if they can do it with just that simple amount of hardware, that it should be something that we see in our games at some point. So that was the coolest thing I saw. I thought the most interesting thing that I heard about was this thing called Sims Carnival, which is not a Sims game.
Is it by EA?
It is by EA.
It would have to be by EA with the name, right?
Well, yeah, and it confused me because there's been a couple of things that have already come out called Sims Carnival, which I think are like party games or whatnot, and I was confused as to why they called this thing it as well. But if you go to thesimscarnival.com, you'll see what essentially looks like, and stop me if you've heard this before, a YouTube of video games. So it's the same. At first, it sounded like the same thing that we heard for Xbox 360 that we'd heard just a couple days ago at John Shappert's keynote about how everybody can make games now and everybody can play each other's games and rate them and what have you. But what was different about The Sims Carnival, and it was cool, is that you don't have to know how to program in order to make a game. It's all pull-down menus. You're just picking, okay, I want to make a game in this genre, and it lists fighting and shoot 'em up or vertical scroller or what have you. And then you're placing where you want the characters to be. You're picking which kind of movement you want. So they showed like a vertical, space shooter thing, like an Asteroids kind of game or what have you. And Rod Humble, the head of the Sims development studio, he was showing it, and he didn't like the way that the spaceship was moving, so he just had a pull-down menu, and he picked a different behavior for the spaceship. You can import your own graphics into it. You can import. They're going to release a lot of the user-generated content that people create for The Sims, and you can use a lot of that as your graphics set as well. And basically, he said this was created in order to answer the question of what kind of game would a non-game designer make? What kind of game would a Russian steelworker make? What kind of game would a policewoman in Bermuda make? What kind of game would your mom make? And
Don't talk about my mom.
well, I know what kind of game your mom would make.
Oh.
So it's up right now?
Did you teach her how to play that game?
So it's up in beta right now. So you can go to thesimscarnival.com and you can register to get involved in it. They didn't say when. They did not say when it was going to be launched, but they said they've released it to 100 people already, and they got 500 games in just a month. People just making just about anything. And I asked if it was just kind of all simple amusement style games, carnival games, as it were. And he said no. Some people have actually tried to make bigger adventure games, and that they think that there's some flexibility there. And I guess we'll see when it launches, but the difference between that and the community games on Xbox 360 is that for the 360 program, you have to know how to program in XNA, which means that I'm not going to be able to make a game on that. I'm not going to be able to put one up there. But with this SimsCarnival.com thing, I could just try to make it, see what kind of game I would make. And I thought, well, that's kind of cool. I would actually try that. And I could see that becoming pretty popular because if anybody can make these things, and then you can rate them and have it behave like YouTube. It seems like democratization of game development was a theme, and Rod Humble giving that talk even said, this is an extreme, but you could imagine that at some point professional game developers might be extinct because it's going to be power to the people, the same way that it's not just the elite who write books or write poetry and record music anymore and whatnot.
All right, that's a little extreme.
Well, yes, and he said it was extreme, right. but it was an interesting direction for him to go in, and it was further than Microsoft had gone the day before.
Well, how does your wife feel about being EA spouse?
Well, I don't know a clever response.
I mean, but there's a way in which EA is putting us all to work. And Sony,
it's like getting somebody to write for free for
your
blogging guy.
That's the Little Big Planet argument too, right? We're going to give you this game. And the game is making more content for our game. Have fun.
The fact that you and your friends together make it, that's different. That's different than all these other things. And that sets it apart.
Yeah, but if you say that, why would we ever have mods then? I mean, people like to go create things, so now you give them better tools to do it.
I'm not arguing.
Yeah, okay.
I have two questions about this. Is it running in a browser or is it software?
It's all web browser.
It's all in browser.
It's all web browser. So
is it
no
free?
Barrier.
Is it free?
To make and to play? As far as I can remember, yes.
Okay.
I don't remember anything about money being involved, but he said they will be paying royalties if your game is popular above a certain threshold.
Wow. That's
cool. But the thresholds.
And that's major, and that's
way up here.
But that's already an advantage over me. And Steven and I were sort of disputing this a bit on the way down here, but Microsoft is charging people to be in the XNA Creators Club. It's $99 a year to be a member. So you're paying for the privilege of creating. I'm not saying it's a horrible price or an unfair price, but you're paying. Then, at the press conference, they showed demos.
Yep.
Right?
Of the games that you can still get and check out right now.
Demos of the game. And they were very coy about what the pricing was going to be, but they never said the games were going to be free. And so it's not fact yet, but you have to, I think it's reasonable to assume that Microsoft is going to charge us for the privilege of playing those games. Now, the question is, are they going to kick back anything to the people, that kind of stuff? I'm not saying it's a bad thing, but I do think that what Steven's describing with Sims Carnival is potentially more revolutionary in that it reaches more people. It's in browser, so it's not tethered to...
There's no barrier to entry, whereas XNA, there's several barriers.
There's no barrier to entry, and they're going to kick revenue to the people who made the game. I mean, that's... Wow.
You going to start working on a game? What kind of game would you make, Enga?
What kind of game would I make?
I like Steven's answer. You should tell us what Steven wasn't even confident he could make a game that anyone would be interested in.
No, what I was saying is because Enga was asking me, why would you... Because I was like, Enga, I think I might actually make some games in this. I might want to try this. And he said, but you have told me before that you wouldn't make a level in Little Big Planet. And I'm like, I think it's different. And the reason it's different is that Little Big Planet, in my mind, is a side-scroller. And I've played so many great side-scroller levels that I wouldn't even try. I can't make anything nearly as good as what other professionals make and people with a lot of free time. This thing...
Heard in context, that makes more sense.
Yeah. This one is like, well, what kind of game would I make if I had a tool set and I didn't have to know anything special?
Dating game.
Drinking game.
Drinking game.
I bet I can make a hell of a good drinking game.
I bet you could.
You'd be drunk after level 1, so I mean, it would be done.
That wouldn't be a very good game. It would be over too quickly. That wouldn't be any fun. John, how about you? What was the standout moment for you of this GDC?
I really enjoyed. I got to play a lot of Boom Blocks the other day.
Oh,
Steven
cool.
Spielberg's
Steven
Boombox.
Spielberg's
Speaking of
Boom
head
Blocks.
tracking, right?
That has a head tracking Easter egg in it. Apparently, they didn't show it. I didn't see it, but there's something in it that does it. I have no idea what. But the thing that
Can you do me one quick favor?
You want me to describe what Boom
Just
Blocks
give me a
is?
yes, because I've seen
Jenga.
a little bit of it, and
It's not.
And I
That's the
don't-
interesting
It's
thing.
Little Big Jenga Planet.
It's Little Big
I-
Jenga Planet.
I got taken to task for calling it Jenga, so I want to know why it's
Lewis
not Jenga.
Castle does not like you to say Jenga anywhere near it, but there is a segment of it that is like Jenga. So it's essentially a big physics simulation with objects in the world, and the basic gameplay is either pulling blocks or throwing things at blocks to make them break up. So there's a lot of levels which are pull pieces out of the tower so it doesn't fall down, or there's throw things at the tower to make blocks that have points assigned to them disappear. But that's the very, very, very basic stuff. There's a lot of competitive stuff, but because it's all physics with the blocks and the objects in the game, they can do things where they kind of throw them and there's like a shooting gallery thing, and it's all the same mechanic. It's like one button and gestures. But then there's an editor, so I mean this is clearly the promise of 2 or 3 years ago GDC of we're all going to be making games by simply just moving things around. It's the same here, but because it's all physics based, there's a lot you can do with there's objects that move, they'll tilt in the real world based on how you place them, and then there's things that explode and things that disappear and things that evaporate, and the behavior of that means the things will fall in the environment. And then the added dynamic is I had no idea why the little creatures were in it. It made no sense to me in the early press stuff. There's like cows and chickens.
It's weird. The
and
creatures look like blocks, kind of.
Yeah, they
right?
look like little blocks.
Yeah.
So every creature, I mean, apparently this was one of Steven's ideas. He wanted people in the background cheering you, and that was the original job of the creatures, and that was all they were there for.
Moral support.
But then they start. Every single creature has a specific behavior that it exhibits. So a monkey will throw things. And initially it'll just throw stuff, but then you start to learn that if a monkey is in the same world as a chicken, it will hunt down the chicken and throw stuff at the chicken. And there's other things where chickens lay eggs that are bombs, and other things will walk up to the bombs and set them off. So when you're building the handmade levels, you can set up these
Like a Rube Goldberg contraption.
These contraptions that rely on the behavior of creatures interacting with each other and create little games out of those scenarios. So they showed 2 pirate ships with bombs lined up and the creatures, and when the creatures start to go after each other, there's this chain reaction of things in the environment which set the bombs, which fire the blocks like cannonballs. So it's a lot of kind of setting up your toys, and then it's like Little Big Planet. It's you set up your toys,
That's
and
cool.
the toys come to life.
A lot of action reaction stuff. I mean,
Very much so. And then you can save it off and you can share it with your friends.
So EA is putting us to work
EA is
again.
putting us
Well,
to work.
of course. Did you happen to walk through the IGF stuff?
No.
Because I think that in this same sort of vein, that the crayon physics game is one of the coolest one of the coolest toys, games, whatever you want to call it, I've played with in a long time. It's just really neat. So the premise of the game is that you have a simple puzzle of getting a ball to a star, and the screen has maybe a couple of fixed objects in it, and the rest of it is you draw inside the screen with a crayon the levers and ramps, and everything has a physics applied to it in order to move that ball from one side of the screen to the other. So you might have a like a wall you have to get over, and you make like a fulcrum in the middle of the wall and sketch yourself out like a scoop with an arm on the end of it, and make it the right length to where when it tumps over, it pops the ball over to the other side.
All of these games and Boom Blocks is the same owe a lot to the Incredible Machine. Do you remember that?
Oh, yeah.
It's
Yeah.
the root of it. I mean, Boom Blocks is an element of Boom Blocks is that in 3D, and you're sort of pointing at the screen. You can rotate things around, but a lot of it is if I throw this thing into the environment and stuff happens. And then you deal with the consequence, and it sounds like that. And also the eye thing was a bit like that. You're kind of drawing something, and then it's interpreting it. Although David, our camera guy, told us that you cannot draw a penis in the PlayStation Eye game.
That's amazing.
It has dick recognition.
That's high tech. Can you draw a breast?
Cock camera 2.0.
Impressive.
Wow.
It's like we were sad because that meant no dick in your PS3 box. It's over. It's done.
No Penis Wars games.
No Penis Wars games. It's very sad. It's a very sad day.
So, John, do the publishers come to you with games that they think are appropriate for what they think your target audience is, or do the publishers come to you about everything?
They come to us about everything once they get to know what we're doing. I think initially there's a tendency to try and push the family-friendly stuff a lot more. But, I mean, for us, by far the most popular game on the site so far has been Assassin's Creed. I mean, that and Call of Duty, way beyond anything. And the requests for information beyond what we've provided have been very, very specific.
Because those are the games that your 12-year-old son is going to want to play.
Exactly.
That perhaps
so,
he shouldn't.
So we're now tailoring what we want around thinking about what is it that kids are asking for.
Yeah.
And the average 12 to 14-year-old boy especially wants to play Emery.
Well, I can't imagine when GTA comes out, because I remember when before I worked at EGM, and where I lived on the West Coast, I was a substitute teacher. And I used to just ask the kids every morning, I'm like, oh, so what are you guys playing? Like 90% of them would raise their hand and say GTA.
And how old were they?
9, 10 years old.
You start talking to kids about GTA specifically, and they all have a strategy on how they're going to get to play GTA 4. They all know. Some of them it's as simple as, look, my mom doesn't want me playing this stuff, but my dad will buy me anything. Or, my brother, and one kid described his brother as being like the drug dealer in the house when it came to video games.
Nice.
But then everyone has a friend of mine has an older brother. Someone told me that the doorman in their building it's like when San Andreas came out, bought a whole box full of San Andreas and sold it to the kids in the building.
That's smart.
For a substantial markup.
That is hilarious.
So kids, they're very, they're
industrious.
They're industrious.
They'll
If they want it, they'll get it.
Nice.
Wow.
Garner,
You
did you
guys-
play any of the other IGF games? Because there's some really unusual stuff that was at that exhibit.
I didn't play hands-on, but I got a chance because I had a very limited amount of time. But I watched and listened to a couple of the demos. First of all, Fez, as you saw on the 1UP show, is so super cool. Like the whole, you don't think so?
No, I'm not.
Oh, I thought you were nodding your head. I thought you were saying no. I was like,
It is cool.
Sorry, I just think it's really.
N-Guy, Fez hater.
N-Guy hates Fez. Confirmed.
Rez better than Fez?
I mean, I think Fez looks really awesome, and I think the music is spectacular, but it is just one level.
It is just one level.
And, it is simple, and I wonder, and as cool that is, will it change it up? Now that he can make a full game, I'm curious where he takes it.
Well,
I think there's
you
a
guys
lot.
love Crush, and this is basically Crush with, I think, maybe a more engaging graphics set because it looks like Super Mario Brothers, and so in some ways it's actually what I thought Super Paper Mario was going to look and play like.
And it seems a little more accessible, right?
Yeah, I think the mechanics
Yeah,
seems
the
to
mechanics
make
works
sense.
really
Because
more.
Crush was really hardcore, pretty tough, right?
Yeah, Fez is pretty simple, actually.
Yeah, and you move the camera, each of 4 rotations until you get it back to the way you want.
So it's a 2D platformer in a 3D world where the screen is 2D, but you can change the perspective.
Yeah.
And so you can just rotate that
I
sucker
didn't see
right
it.
around.
What did he write it on? Is it a PC game or?
The PC game, it won for Best Visuals at the Independent Games Festival, and the other game that we were just talking about,
The crayon thing?
Crayon Physics Deluxe, won the grand prize.
Oh, okay.
So that was
Which you guys both judged on.
Yes, and I did not vote for Crayon Physics Deluxe.
So why not?
Prize. Because for me, physics games are kind of like the FPSs of independent games, where there's so many of them, and I think that one of the reasons why is because there's, the game does a lot of the work for the designer. They sort of set up the physics algorithms and what have you, and then they certainly have to tweak it and what have you. But you're ultimately going for, having the play of it be seeing how the numbers are crunched, behind the scenes to see whether things balance or.
As Andrew posted, 9 times out of 10 that ice noise is Shane.
I'm making a drink for N-Guy.
But
I got your back, homie.
Which isn't to say I didn't vote for a physics game for my my pick for game of the show at the Independent Games Festival. World of Goo is fantastic, and I guess coming to a Wii and a
I
PC
didn't look at that one very long.
Yeah, it's really cool. You're basically just it's a variation on Tower of Goo, or a sequel, and you basically have these kind of inky blobs that are kind of just floating around the level. And the way Tower of Goo worked is that any 2 blobs that are near each other, if you then kind of drag the mouse from one blob to the next, it'll then cause a little connection. So if you imagine connecting 3 of those, you now have a triangle.
Right.
It's all taking place in 2D. And if you keep connecting blobs, they eventually are creating, a base of a structure, and so you could create, a series of triangles, and then wind up with a much larger triangle. And you're in the Tower of Goo, you're just trying to see how high you can get. In World of Goo, it's kind of using that mechanic in more of a side-scroller, platformy kind of thing. So it's how do I get all these goo things to connect and create a structure that bridges across this gap so that something could get past it. And one of the neat things is that they have this metagame to it where if you save more of the goo blobs than the level requires you to, you take the others and you put it into this Corporation of Goo side game, and in that one it's like the Tower of Goo. You're building this vertical tower, but there are clouds in the sky, and every cloud has the name of somebody else who's playing the game, and it represents how high they got their tower.
Oh,
so when I was judging the game, I was building my tower, and then I saw a Kotaku cloud, and I'm like, I gotta get to higher than the Kotaku cloud. And then I saw a joystick cloud, and I kept building my tower to get higher up.
One mechanic I saw in because I went to the experimental games workshop, which Jonathan Blow of Braid and Outspoken, I guess, would it be fair to say that he's like the David Jaffe of indie games?
I think so, yes.
Yeah, really outspoken guy and very talented. And so I saw a couple of games were built around the same mechanic, which is that the art direction is black and white, and you have a black character and a white character, and in the white world, it's like side scrollers, right? So 2D. The black objects are obstacles, whether they're pits or spikes or that kind of thing. And in the black world, the white objects are obstacles. And so what it is, you have to guide either in one game it was one character that you had to navigate. So like if in the white world the character was black, in the black world the character was white, and then in the other game it was two characters, and it was basically about getting from the entrance to the exit. And
That's
so
cool.
you could push around stuff, and stuff that would be a block in one world, when you invert it becomes a pit in the other world. So I'm not sure I'm doing a great job describing it, but I mean the stuff it was insanely charming and entertaining.
It's cool.
To watch.
It's a negative thing.
Yeah, exactly.
It's a negative thing. It's white and black negative thing.
Yeah.
So the thing to me about walking through the IGF display that stood out the most is that maybe I haven't looked at enough of them in years past, but I felt like there was a real sense of diversity now going there. Like there wasn't a bunch of two-stick shooters there. But that was cool. I mean, I really expected to see another crop of them, right? But instead there's like, Fez, which is doing some platform stuff. There was like some sort of space strategy game. There's the Goo thing you're talking about. There's the crayon physics deal. There's this crazy Half-Life 2 mod with like an adventure story to it, and the flat. What is the name of that? That was nuts. There was a line of people watching that.
I didn't see the mods. Did you notice how many music games there were and how they're all different from each other?
Yeah,
that's really cool, and it's clearly a sign that people, I think, now feel empowered to just go crazy making music games, and maybe kind of the success of Guitar Hero and Rock Band is finally sort of removing anybody's fears of doing that. There was a side-scrolling platformer called Fret Nice that you play with a Guitar Hero or Rock Band controller.
Oh, that's cool. I did not see that.
You run to the right with the top fret button. You run to the left with the next fret button, or it might have been the top two buttons, run right, next two but run left, but whatever. You jump by tilting the guitar.
Oh, that's tight.
And then the enemies are floating in the sky, and if you want to attack them, you basically have to play a riff. And the laser beams that your guy shoots out are basically you hitting the strum bar, but you have to play certain notes, and that's
Wild Stallions.
Well, no, it's determined by what the character looks like. So there's cues, like if it has pink horns, that means like two notes associated with the red fret button or something. And so you're playing these different riffs as you jump, and it didn't work as well as I'd want it to work, but it was still a pretty cool idea. I mean, Guitar Hero meets whatever.
At least they're like doing stuff like that, and it's cool because I think that a lot of this also stems from the growing. We talk about all the time the growing rise of casual games, and it gives an outlet for all of these things. I mean, that inspires these guys to work on, or guys and gals, people to work on this stuff because there's a real outlet for it, there's a real demand for it, and at the same time, it also says that we probably had enough Bejeweled clones. They probably don't need to make any more matching boxes and color gems and all that kind of stuff. There's a lot more that can be done. That's really fun, innovative stuff to sit down and have fun with and play with in a casual game. It's cool.
Says the guy who likes Puzzle Quest.
Dude, I like...
And makes Bill and Ted jokes.
Yeah. So? What the hell's wrong with that?
Well, I will say real quick that there does seem to be a bit of a crisis of some sorts in the worlds of indie gaming and experimental gaming, because from a couple of people I spoke with, there's a feeling that some of the indie games are becoming too professionalized, sort of looking like, do they really have an indie spirit?
Well, that's
it's
the tip of the iceberg.
What is punk, what is indie? And then the feeling that some of the experimental games aren't, in fact, experimental experimental enough that they're sort of getting too polished. The ideas for experimental games workshop is that you have something that you're really sort of working on and sort of trying to work through, and these are just maybe too polished. So I'm still trying to work my way through the indie and experimental world. It's all new to me, but for longtime veterans of the indie and experimental scenes, there's a small but growing concern about the nature of the exactly. They might blow up, but they won't go pop.
Well, and that's kind of the concern also is that all of these potential downloadable games become the new battle lines for the console war. It's like, oh, we're going to get you for WiiWare, we're going to get you for PSN, we're going to get you for Xbox Live Arcade, and that would be, I think that would be really antithetical to the whole creative outlet and spark that's there, and being really independent and artistic. And
didn't Sony announce that the PS3 dev kit was going to be like $200 for the indie stuff? Did I hear? There was like some like sort of homebrew solution thing for PlayStation that was like going to be really, really cheap.
It would be interesting. I mean, I wonder if they could ever like pull off the PS3 generation equivalent of like a Net Euros. Mm-hmm. That would be pretty cool. I mean, and that would be like the perfect way to have a tool out there that you could do the same sort of thing you could do on PC, but out through your PS3. And boy, it would certainly trump XNA. It would trump XNA all over the place.
I will say that Phil Harrison at the Luminaries launch said that he was pretty impressed with the community games announcement, and Sony did pioneer sort of Net Heroes and all that stuff, and you have to imagine that they want to do something similar, and the question is, where does it sit on their priority list?
Sure.
But I got the impression that that Phil wants to do something along those lines.
I think they got bigger things to
worry about.
At least for now, maybe next year.
What sort of things?
Like what were we talking about yesterday?
That home implosion at the end of the show yesterday. Oh my gosh.
Epic.
All right, Shane, how about you? What jumps out of you out of GDC?
In terms of playing games,
games, whatever.
I already spoke about Two Human and both Bond of Commandos, which I was really impressed by all of those. Today I got a chance to go back to Capcom, play a little Street Fighter 4, because I hadn't played it since 2-3 months ago when it was just 4 characters. Now there's 10 and 2 more stages, and yeah, I still really like it. And it was cool to see other people who are really good at Street Fighter who've already started to master saving and revenge and the EXs and everything. And it's really fun. And I played the 2 new characters. I think both those characters look really cool. Yeah, I think all systems go. No reason to think this game isn't going to be great. Everyone I talked to really likes it.
I played it. Yeah. I was there with you, and it's just really solid.
Yeah, it's addictive. Like we all wanted, we wish we had.
Yeah, like I mean,
we all want that cabinet here in our office.
Cesar and Jason were there, and everybody was like, we just want to go there all day and play.
Yeah.
So I mean, that was a good sign that people even when they had little comments about here and there, they just wanted to get in there, see how.
And the other cool thing today was kind of the day where if you drop by, you can maybe get a chance to play it. And we were in there, 2 God of War guys were playing it. The head of Innis, the guy who makes Elite Beat Agents, was there. The Prototype guys came to see it. Yeah. So like all these other developers, like Street Fighter still draws in people who make games, people who love games, and I think it's a really smart decision.
Did you get to talk to them like offline, find out what they thought of it?
No,
well, actually, one of the God of War guys, or I don't think they were former God of War guys.
He's ex-God of War guy.
Yeah, and
was it Derek Daniels?
Yeah, and he actually was playing so long, and he started to feel bad, and he actually was still winning. He just got up and left because I mean he just felt bad, and they were continually playing. It was awesome.
But the best thing I heard this week, I got to go to a luncheon with Reggie Fils-Aimé, the president of Nintendo, and Reggie, who I got to go to a lunch with him at DICE like 2 years ago. So it was cool to get to do it again because I was really impressed back then. He really cares what we have to think, and you could ask him anything. And it was only a few journalists there.
What did he eat?
He had the halibut, I think. Anyway,
crunching questions from the multiplayer blog at MTV.
But I was pretty surprised by what he had to say. He had a lot of things to say about everything, and one of the big focuses was how Wii is going to overtake 360 sooner than you think here in America.
He's saying June, right?
June, right?
He's saying June, and the way he talked about the Xbox 360, he used words like sputtering, and I believe Jeff Keighley asked him, if you were Microsoft, what would you do? And Reggie was, well, I won't answer that precisely, but if I was a Microsoft shareholder, I'll tell you what I would think, and I would think that the Xbox project may not have been a good idea. Overall, like to hear that coming from Reggie, I'm like, wow, okay, that's kind of nuts.
Did you get the impression that
how is that nuts?
I don't know. Like just to hear him talk about the competition that way, I was surprised.
So what do you say about Sony?
Like he kind of what everyone's saying about Sony, like the January MPDs, is that he thinks that might be a trend, and like the battle for second and third, he was very much like who's on third, who's on second, because he's obviously on first. And
obvious. I mean, they're in a strong leadership position. Of course, he's in a position where he can look at 360, and that's his biggest competitor in North America, and absolutely take a shot at him.
Did you ask him where all his games are?
Well, yeah, I did. So specifically on DS, I'm like, yeah. So DS. Where are the Nintendo games? Where are they? And he's like, well, right now we're letting our third parties shine. He's like,
it's like they don't need to do any of their own. There are thousands of the damn things.
Right, and he's like, we're letting for core gamers, things like Ace Attorney or Square has a bunch of things coming.
So what he really means is
year.
Nintendo's going to continue to release games in Japan, and either he or Nintendo in Japan is basically saying we're not going to bring them out here because we're not going to spend the money to market them.
No, he implied they have a lot of things for third and fourth quarter that we'll see at E3.
Like my thing, I know there's Mario Kart and Smash Brothers and Wii Fit are on the way, but that's it. That's all we really know about.
Well, yeah, he was very bullish. He's not talking about anything past second quarter, and that's what E3 is for. And they're going to make a huge splash at E3. But in terms of us getting Wii Fit and Mario Kart later than Europe, we're like, what about that? And he's like, well, they don't get Smash Brothers till fall, and they have to position these things and talk about.
It's very hard to press those discs. And,
it's more about hardware. And he's talking about how in January when Smash Brothers and Wii Fit hit Japan, they got the lion's share of the 1.8 million units they can produce every month. So in March, the U.S. will get the lion's share of those 1.8 million units for Smash Brothers.
That's good business. That makes sense.
So in May, when Wii Fit hits, they once again they can reallocate to America. And he said, we're not going to make any announcements about increasing production of Wii units because they'd have to build new factories or, co-opt other people's production lines. And the joke came, hey, maybe you can get Toshiba's production lines. And he brought up HD DVD.
I'm sure they could probably downgrade the HD DVD factories to make Wii's.
And we talked about HD DVD and Blu-ray a bunch and how he thinks that might be a stigma for Xbox and, on about that.
What do you have to say about that? I'm interested. What do you think? Could it be?
He believed it could be.
But
very well.
I'm not buying that.
No, I don't think it's so much a stigma. I do think though that the 300,000 people that bought it, two things. One is buyer beware. It really is their fault. But at the same time, they were sacrificed on the altar of Microsoft's ambition to stymie any dominant format in the HD DVD and Blu-ray battle. Microsoft is interested in digital downloads because that suits them. They were upset that IHD, which is their authoring format, wasn't included in the Blu-ray
believer in the conspiracy.
I'm saying, dude, it's not a conspiracy. It's just that there were clearly other objectives at work. For most of the battle, there's no real way that Microsoft could have thought HD DVD could have come out on top, except for one thing, which is that I think the reason, from what I'm hearing, why Toshiba was so blown away when that announcement got made before CES is because they thought that they were on the verge of getting Warner to go exclusive, and it went the other way. And my gut is that Warner was playing both sides against each other for the best deal, but Warner's had to know that even if they went exclusive the other way, Sony couldn't back out. They couldn't walk away from this. And Microsoft knows all these things were going on and goes out and markets this thing and puts it out there. And look, at the end, it's just 300,000 people. But I'm saying it's a small black eye. It's a little blemish in the corner somewhere.
Right.
When you were talking to him, something I noticed whenever I spoke to 4 or 5 different Nintendo people this week, all of them talked about Endless Ocean. Did that come up from him?
Didn't come up once.
Because I got the impression that
Reggie Dives.
He didn't come up.
I got
once.
the impression that they see Endless Ocean as being representative of a new kind of thing that they want to move towards. This whole sort of more passive, just sort of experience rather than game, because they seemed really enamored with it.
Sorry, fell asleep there.
I fell asleep. I did listen to you guys talk about Blu-ray versus HD DVD, which is far more boring.
You're like petting fish. Steven's like, sign me up.
Endless Ocean is. I've heard you talk about it before. How much have you played of Endless Ocean?
I played about an hour and a half of Endless Ocean.
You need to play more.
I mean, I see the appeal, but for me, the visuals just aren't there, really. That for me, like, if I want a photorealistic diving simulator, having seen Aqua, which is the same thing, basically, it's Aquanauts Holiday 4 or whatever, I'm going to wait for that. Like, do I really need 2 scuba diving games in 1 year? Really? I don't know.
No, but
it's kind of my...
But I think you guys have undersold the appeal of it, because I think it's... For me, it's like a difference from all the other games that I play, and I thought that the developer did a really fantastic job of slowly doling out for you all this really all these interesting set pieces. I mean, people say it's not
Fish.
a non-game.
Well, I mean,
Fish, but a lot of people in real life like to go dive and see things underwater. And
I
stuff
see
looks
the
Diving
cool.
in real life is fun.
I see the appeal. I think it has some cool features like the online co-op, the custom soundtracks, and I think if I was like a 12-year-old kid, I'd be really excited about it. But I really did get bored. I did. And
Well, I guess I'm a 12-year-old kid, but it's not the co-op. It's not the custom soundtracks that's cool. It's that you get the message from the guy, whoever the mysterious financier has you diving, and he says, go to quadrant G8, and I think there's a whale shark there, and you go and you dive. And you can't really see that far because of the fog or draw distance, or because the ocean's murky, one of the three. And the camera then shifts, and you see slowly this huge whale shark swim past you. You grab onto its tail, you see where it's going to take you. The next thing you know, it's taking you through this current that you couldn't have otherwise dove through or swam through yourself. And then you come out the other side of the current, and you've discovered this whole lost city.
Right.
And then you're just like exploring the lost city, and there's nothing to fight. There's no action in it, but the way they've staged it, and you look through the ruins, and you're like, oh, there's a huge manta ray at the bottom of those ruins.
It is compelling. That's what
Yeah,
people say. They say those moments are compelling, and I do respect
it. It's
it.
like Blue Planet, the video game.
It's just not quite for me, but I think they've released at the right price point, and I think it's cool that Nintendo published it.
I'm waiting for the National Geographic theme song to start.
I don't want to be a hater, but some other things Reggie touched on. I asked him about Fatal Frame 4 because NCL announced that they're partnering with Tecmo to publish Fatal Frame 4, and if that's indicative of like Nintendo reaching out to third parties to help them because third parties aren't helping themselves, and he was like, he wouldn't confirm if Nintendo is going to publish it here or co-publish it, but he did say, that is what we're going to do more.
So
reach out.
Where's the Tecmo game that Sony's going to co-publish? Because they've got Ninja Gaiden, which Microsoft is publishing.
Right.
They've got Fatal Frame, which is in Japan.
Tecmo Bowl.
I think that might end up somewhere.
I know.
Maybe
I'm kidding.
Tokobot 3. I don't know. Who cares? Other things we talked about. WiiWare was a big thing, and that was the day of the Microsoft announcement. So he was really interested, and we talked about that a long time. And he was like, "Oh, WiiWare is way better than XNA Creators Club because we have no limitations and people can do whatever they want, and we have no concept approval."
File size.
Well, yeah, so file size, and we asked pretty straight up, like, well, how do I access these games, and how am I going to do it? And, like, Mark Franklin, the PR guy, coughed, like, SD cards. And I was like, well, SD cards are annoying because you can't access games directly from them. You have to copy them back and forth. We'll see. And Reggie had no answers for that. He's very evasive on that. In terms of the Wii seeming old or seeming outdated, next console, he's like, hey, Wii's only a year and a couple of months. We're just getting started. We're selling out. We haven't even released new colors of Wiimotes. Reggie said that. He's like, we haven't even done that yet. All right? So the idea that, like, Wii's going somewhere or they're going to repackage it, they're going to new bundles. We ask Wii Fit bundle. He's like, no. Why would you make a Wii Fit bundle? We can't stock the ones we have. So no new bundles.
I'm going to be interested to see over the next year how much the transition in America to digital transmission changes the landscape of what people own in their homes. Like, how many people are going to buy digital boxes and stick them on their old analog televisions, and how many people are going to break down and say, you know what, screw it, I'm going to go buy an HD TV. And once people start doing that, how many of them are going to say, wow, you know what, maybe I don't really like all of my games looking like last generation games. They don't all look like crap. There's good art on Wii.
You know what? You're overestimating people's ability to tell.
That's true. I might be. I could easily be doing that.
I've sat in my living room playing like EA Sports games on the Wii on an HD TV and had people come over and say, "Oh my God, that looks incredible!" And I'd be like, "You're kidding, right?"
Or you've been living for a couple years.
It's going to be interesting to see how that pans out. I'm not convinced that there aren't going to be a lot of people who just do go buy the digital converter boxes that go on top.
And one of the last things
depends on what happens with the rebate with taxes, right?
That's true. And the idea of like casual gamers only loving Wii, he's like, no, really, actually, it's core gamers and enthusiast gamers who buy the Wii, and then it's 3 or 4 non-gamers who pick it up, and that's how it's expanding. He's like, it's a fallacy that everyone thinks that Wii is only for casual gamers. So he was very.
I disagree. I think he's right that it's not just casual gamers, but I disagree with him that it's just hardcore buying it and then other. It's across the spectrum. All sorts of people buy Wiis, from core gamers who want to play one game on it to people who would never have considered themselves a gamer at all that went and saw it someplace and pick it up. So yeah.
But it was a good lunch, and I talked to him again yesterday. They had a mixer, and it sounds like E3 is a really big focus for them, and they realize that the console war has gotten really crazy, and they need to announce more things. They need to make sure people have faith in the continued success of DS and Wii
So new wacky peripheral and software confirmed for E3.
So yeah, lots of Reggie. That was me this week.
Look, Wii Lacrosse.
Well, I've said
That
it
would be
before
awesome.
You like Wii Lacrosse?
I play lacrosse.
Yeah, he's
I'm a
totally
big,
lacrosse.
so that would be. I'll go make that game.
With a raping minigame, be great.
Whoa!
There you go again. Every time I'm on the show, you bring up rape.
Sorry. He was acquitted, right? I don't even know.
Yeah, they were.
Don't start with that. Yeah.
Anyway.
Yeah, you're an idiot.
Brian, how about you? What
So
what pops from you?
well, this last issue for EGM, we did GTA 4 for a cover, and we
Yes.
also did an open world roundup. So all like the Mercenaries and all these different games. And after doing all these interviews, I was really impressed by what Radical's doing with Prototype. It's basically the next game from the guys who made Scarface and Incredible Hulk: Ultimate Destruction, which Incredible Hulk was actually really good.
It was
was a
really
good
it was
game,
a
yeah.
surprisingly
Really
good game.
Well, the premise sounded really cool. You basically play this shape-shifting kind of no-name who can basically become anybody in the world and can morph into have these hands that can pierce through the concrete or this body armor and just run through cars, and just sounded really cool. And he's describing the co-op. And last night they had an event, and I got a demo of it from the creators, and aside from GTA 4, for the obvious reasons, for the open world market, this is by far my most anticipated game.
This is the one that was on cover of Game Informer ages
Yeah.
ago with the
Yes.
tentacle hands.
The hero, he
yes.
wears a hoodie, kind of like a
Yeah.
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 Oh yeah, and the
He's
thing
like
is,
some kind of genetic
but
mutant.
don't
There's also a hoodie though in Infamous, right? Or am I hallucinating?
Hoodies are hot.
Yeah.
No, he's like a bike messenger.
Some other game
He's
has a
bald,
hoodie,
he's
though.
bald right
There is
now.
another game with a hoodie.
Jay Allard's influence is
Ugh.
spreading.
No,
Did
but
they show you the Lost part of it?
no.
That has this whole connection. Like they're trying to go for this Lost style of storytelling. Where
Oh,
you
he
kinda
did
figure out the
describe
story,
it where basically you when you basically absorb somebody so you can become them.
kill them.
Yeah, exactly. You have a flashbacks, right? Like you tap into their
there's
memories or something.
250 or so characters that'll eventually populate the open world, and as you take any of them out, some node, they're like part of some tangled web of characters is illuminated, and then there's like a video clip associated with each of those characters, and watching them begins to kind of piece together the story for you.
So yeah, that's really cool.
Which
I mean,
I like Lost, so that sounded
No,
very cool.
same here. No, it was really cool.
So that means so you essentially unfold the story in any order.
Right, but
I think they
if
kind
there's-
of dole. I think they dole out like groups of those characters. So there's, and they didn't say the numbers, but I could imagine. Let's say there's going to be 20 of those types of characters first that you could interact with,
Gotcha.
and then maybe getting rid of them allows you to go to sort of the next tier of it. And they said that not all the movies will represent what really is going on, but it's those characters' perspectives of what's going on, and that watching them will help you then figure out what the real backstory is, who you are.
I don't know if they're
amnesia.
still doing it or not, but when they originally talked about that, the other point they brought up was that on one single playthrough, you probably won't uncover all the nodes. And so what you take away from the way the story unfolded depends on which of those perspectives you saw and what their point of view to the story was. So it could be a really very interesting take. It's very cool. I mean, the big deal was, are they still doing the deal where you spike some guy and you have all of their knowledge, so you can grab a guy who is driving a tank and spike him, and now you know how to drive a tank?
No, I mean that I think it just does it. I don't think really you have to spike him in order to learn how to do the take. But I think the cooler thing about this game that a lot of people have not really seen yet is that a lot of open world games, actually I bring this up in like Spider-Man, the last Spider-Man game, my boss Dan Shue made a point that when Spider-Man lands and starts fighting like the villain, the civilians don't react. Like no one's reacted. Like they got these two superheroes fighting each other. Well,
Wait, it is New York though, dude. I mean, we're seriously skilled. Like
Jaded.
People start fighting on the subway, or whatnot. You just turn your head. You're not trying to get into it.
So in Prototype, we were last night. There was looked like Times Square, and you have the main character fighting the military, and at the same time you have these mutants fighting. So it's like a three-way death match, and just shit is going crazy. Like helicopters, tanks firing each other, and the civilians, they're just running around like crazy.
That's
so
awesome.
they're actually reacting to what's happening in the world, and I really haven't seen that much from just the random AI just floating around the city. So I mean, as cool as all the powers are and stuff like that, I just thought that the little things a lot of open world games have not done yet, this game is doing.
It's definitely looking cool.
I mean, and just little things like when you have the Juggernaut body armor, and you're running away from these half breeds, what they're called, I think, and you're just running through, and you see the cars, you're just knocking cars out of the way, and you kind of turn the camera a little bit, it, and you see the cars hitting the half-breeds, and they're actually slamming the cars out of the way as they chase you and stuff. And like you go up to like a top building, and those things are smart enough; they'll follow you all the way up there. So I know it comes out like in the fall, and I called it like my sleeper game, but now I think it's getting to be shown really well. And
I don't think
it's
it's going
not
to be a
sleeper
sleeper
game
anymore.
No, it's really cool.
I don't think it's going to be a sleeper.
And it's good that they're distancing themselves from GTA, because another game that's set in a New York City style place.
Can I ask you guys a question though? Because I got a demo of Prototype yesterday, and one of the things that really stood out to me was that it's super violent, and the way that you take guys out, you're dismembering them or what have you, and they showed me this one thing where you want to kill, I don't remember if it was a person or a mutant or whatever, but you punch them right in the stomach and your fist goes right through.
Yeah.
And you see the bloody fist sticking out the other side of the character. And I didn't know how to ask the question the right way, because of course the way I wanted to ask the question is just like, what are you guys thinking, and what is it about games where you've all been to game demos and they show you the most ultra violent things and
catches your attention.
I usually like I sit there and I'm like, I don't know how to react, because I feel like in like normal company, like there would be a consensus that, wow, that's kind of over the top and crazy. But when you're getting a game demo, it's always just like, hey, that's cool. Let's get excited about this. So I'm like, how did you guys decide on that level of gore? And he really couldn't answer the question except to say that, well, we start with our concept artist and we want to see what's going to be cool, and then we go from there. And I just don't know. It's like punching a fist through somebody's body. Cool.
I think are we cool with that? I think the average listener to this podcast would think that's pretty fucking badass.
Especially if you punch through their stomach and it actually doesn't look all wonky and weird.
Yeah.
Like if actually for the first time you're not seeing clipping problems and all that stuff, like which it looked pretty good even at that state.
But is that part of like a divide between games? I mean, not that like Saw isn't violent or whatever, and I don't mean to take us completely down this path, but is that part of the divide between video games and a lot of other popular forms of entertainment, in that some of the stuff that like we're not even supposed to blink at is just like really out there?
It's actually struck me about the Gears of War 2 trailer as well, like that what we get is Marcus flipping the gun upside down and chopping the guy in half. Great, okay. So it's more of the same. Excellent.
Well, how do you feel when like Wolverine goes berserk in Marvel and chops people up?
I read DC when I was growing up.
Y'all gonna throw down now? Shit, it's heavy.
We should have Sean here to do like the comic guy voice.
I don't know. I mean, this is an interesting argument, because you could say, did Taxi Driver need to be as violent as Taxi Driver was?
But let's not talk about other forms of entertainment, because that's always the easy way, is to say, well, but movies don't have to do this. Is there anything weird about the fact that when you sit in the prototype demo and you see that, like, have you guys had moments where you've seen something ultra violent and you've either had a reaction or noticed that you're not reacting?
Well, I've been in demos where I can tell they want me to think, oh, that's wicked badass. You just decapitated that person and shat in their neck, or whatever. And like that.
What game is that?
I wish. But like,
is that a WiiWare talk?
Chocolate Rain.
I wish.
Reggie said WiiWare was going to be the best, right?
No AO on WiiWare. He did say that. But I think they do think that is what we want to see. I think
because they assume we're all 14.
It's a bunch of nerds here at GDC. Been around.
What would the Wiimote and Nunchuck be like for that?
Well, look, I mean, there's a way. I mean, again, after some of the reactions last week, I hate to get too philosophical, but there's a way in which extreme content gets normalized in games by virtue of the fact where games have been. There's a way in which, like, and because of the, for gameplay, you have to have a certain amount of repetition, right? There are mechanics, and you do them over and over again. If it's a music game like Rock Band, you strum and hit the frets over and over again. If it's a game like God of War, you're going to grab people and rip them up and do combos over and over again. And so even if you were to disagree with Steven's point about the intensity of violence, it'd be hard to disagree with the frequency of violence, because that act that he's talking about in Prototype is probably going to be committed over and over and over again.
It was many times in the demo. And it's weird you say that, because when you said that, I was like, yeah, I really didn't react that much to it. And maybe I've just been so desensitized to that kind of...
Prototypes, I mean, in the context of...
News.
In the context of Prototype, it fits, because that is a pretty violent game. I mean, you're talking about a New York City that's been completely locked down because there's some kind of weird virus that's turning everybody into these horrific, giant, animalistic mutants that are like very violent, very, very bloodthirsty. It's a very bloodthirsty game. You've got this guy who you play, the protagonist that you play, who's evidently some sort of military experiment gone horribly wrong, who's completely screwed up in the head. It's a very violent game.
I think to Stephen's point is, it doesn't have to be quite that extreme, right? You know, why does it have to be everyone going hyper-violent? I mean, it's one of those...
In this case, maybe because that's the story they're telling.
But at the same time, it is actually, to the Fox News point, it's sort of just reaffirming that video games do that.
But of course, we would all apply the nuance, I think, that I don't think for a second that because a video game has somebody punching a fist through somebody, that's going to make anybody imitate that. And that's always where this argument goes with when uninformed people are talking about it, is they assume that that's the only thing, that it's all imitative. And I want to discuss this kind of extreme violence in a way that doesn't go down that path and really just talks about what does extreme violence do for the aesthetics of the games that we play. Does it hold it back in any way? How does it shape the stories and the experiences that we have in the games that we play? And we get a lot of hyper-violent anti-hero characters in our games. And is that because of the points that N-Guy is raising, that the repetition of violence that you need to have gameplay brings developers towards ultra-violence, and then that therefore describes the character?
There's a familiarity. There's a familiarity to the beat 'em up, right? There's a familiarity to the I press some buttons and this dude kicks the shit out of some guy. That's a very, very, very common game mechanic that we've seen all the time. So it's very easy to say, okay, well, we are building this game and we have this story and this idea, and then here's how the mechanics can work. Here's what's going to happen inside the game. I think it just means that we need a better breadth of story that we're telling. I mean, we didn't have to have. I'll fall back on Uncharted because we had Amy here earlier this week. Didn't have to have hyper-violence in that.
But it was the most violent team-rated game I've ever played.
It's mostly gunplay.
But I think
that bothered Steven.
But I think about this punching through someone's torso. Well, think about the curb stop in Gears of War. People were really excited about it. You heard about it. It was really violent.
It was pretty violent.
And it could have been this team was like, well, we want our curb stop. We want some really violent thing
to
that
set
people
the gameplay apart.
Yeah,
right?
people are gonna be, oh, did you see that, man?
Right. And imagine that's where a lot of this comes from. Is you're just simply setting your gameplay apart. But I don't think we talk often enough about what that gameplay then does to the types of stories we get told in games, or just the types of characters we get to control, and how that affects the range of the experiences that we're.
So where's the line that it becomes gratuitous?
It's an individual thing. I mean, because another thing we haven't talked about is duration. The fact is, your description of Prototype is not entirely dissimilar from a movie like, say, Cloverfield.
Not at all. I was thinking of that, actually.
Cloverfield lasts, thankfully, about 80 minutes, right? It's a pretty short movie, right? Didn't need to be any longer. Prototype is probably going to be 8 hours at least, 10, So you've got violence, let's just say, for argument's sake, it's as intense as what you would see in Cloverfield, but the frequency of it is much greater,
and the repetition,
the duration of it is much longer. So, what does that do? I mean, part of that is the nature of games. You take anything. I mean, if Rock Band were the equivalent of The Doors, you can play a lot more music in Rock Band than there is in The Doors and doing other things. That's the nature of what games are. But what happens when you apply it to these things that concern people who are gamers and concern people who aren't gamers? And I think Steven's right that we don't talk about that stuff enough.
See, I want to play a game, and tell me if there's already been one created that could be, full of fights and combat or whatever. But I want to play a game where there's only one gun and only one bullet in that gun, because I want to know what it feels like in that game. Even if I break everybody else's neck by hand or whatever, I want to know what it's like to only be able to shoot one person in a game. And I could take everybody out all different ways, but I want to know what that one kill feels like.
You could play Metal Gear Solid without ever killing anybody,
and just kill one person. I should do that and see what it feels like.
You could play Yakuza with no bullets.
And I've said this before.
Jeez.
But there you go.
I'll just say this. I've said it more and I'll say it again. One of the most violent games of this generation is Flow. Not only are you eating all
every
these
bacteria
creatures,
for himself,
you're eating your own kind.
But what I'm talking about right now, though, is a game where
cannibalistic
flow. The extreme thing, and in this case, I'm saying the gun with one bullet, that you have that extreme action. So what if I could only punch through one guy through the stomach in the entire game? How would that feel? I would just like to experience a game that is able to give that occasional punctuation of violence instead of almost a monotony of violence.
All right, so kiss the dragon, the game.
Well, it's funny, Metal Gear Solid 3 has been a hot topic in the last few weeks because of Sean Elliott.
Oh, my God.
You can play through the entire game without killing anybody, except for the last boss, who you have to kill. Who is the most meaningful character in the entire game.
Right, and Silent Hill 2 is almost the exact same
Almost
thing.
that same. And they make you do it at the end. They make you kill it.
Feel that.
So
you feel that.
The killing has a meaning there, as opposed to the game where you're killing 5,000 people.
Something that Peter Molyneux brought up about Fable 2. I don't know if you saw the E3 demo a while ago where he was talking about the whole notion of consequence in Fable 2, and he showed a demo where you were attacked by 3 guys, and it was to illustrate the new sort of consequence death mechanic. And if you lost the fight, you would fall to the ground, and the only way to get up was you had to trade XP for speedy getting up. But if you'd run out of XP, you would stay on the ground, and they would beat the shit out of you for a period of time, and you would become
you'd be disfigured.
And you would become disfigured.
Yeah.
And over the course of the game, your physical appearance would have an impact on the way other characters interacted with you. They tested that with a lot of hardcore gamers who hated it. Except the ones that went out of their way to get extremely disfigured, just as a sort of like perverse experiment.
It's like Fight Club. I want you to hit me as hard as you can.
Exactly. So there were the people that did that, but the majority of people could not deal with a video game with consequence. That is because the death mechanic in video games is so ingrained in the culture from the last 20 years, and it's based on a technical problem, where it used to be that you couldn't save the game, and the only way was if you died, it had to reset and take you back. We're so stuck in that way of thinking that he said he was watching people play this, and they were turning the console off to force the old school death mechanic because they couldn't deal with it.
You were describing that, and I was like, I don't want to be beat up. I'm just going to shut it off.
So what's happened is over the course of the last 20 years, there's a number of generations of gamers have gone through the system with this idea of how consequence and death and everything in games it manifests itself, and we can't deal with it any other way. And when they experiment with it, we tend to not like it. And he said it's to the point now where it's a generational thing. The only way to clear that out of the system is start young. And with the young games, they have to get used to a completely different way of managing consequence in video games. And that generally, hardcore gamers right now, they're probably never going to be able to deal with it.
That makes complete sense, because look at the reaction to the Vita Chamber save system in BioShock. I mean, I'll admit to you, I had a mixed reaction to it initially, not in a negative way, but 2 things. First of all, it confused me. Like, the idea that I came back, but the health of the enemies hadn't reset, I couldn't process it. It was so different from the way games are constructed. But once I got the hang of it and understood it, I was like, this is a really great signal to me, someone who plays a number of games but I'm not super hardcore, that this would be a game I'd actually be able to finish on the current difficulty setting it was on, and that was great. But you're right, I can see, now that you talk it through, I can completely understand that, because it throws you off.
Well, I think the way Molyneux is exploring consequences is kind of scary, and I don't know if I like it. Part of why I like Burnout Paradise is because there are no consequences for failure in anything. And with the demonstration at the press conference, where you invite your friend into co-op, and in your world where you've carefully created this world, have a family, your friend suddenly shoots your family and kills them and leaves, and that's ruined your game. Your family's dead forever because you invited this guy into your game. I think that's kind of scary to me.
So part of the unspoken part of this is the implication that, can we as gamers all rely on each other to behave in a mature way in each other's experiences? And the answer is no.
Have you met us?
Interestingly enough, that's what Peter wants to challenge you on, because we pressed him on that question when we had our personal demo in the suite, and we pressed him on that question. He said he really liked the idea of forcing you in a virtual world to have a personal, real relationship like that.
John, what did he say?
And be forced to that.
I'm sorry. Can you just finish up on that point about the combat and the falling down and what have you? Because you said that in the focus test, a lot of the hardcore gamers didn't like it.
Yeah.
Is he changing it?
Yeah, they took it out.
Of course.
Yeah. Because people just could not handle it.
That's really disappointing.
Yeah. So what we've got to now is that technology-wise, and in terms of the tools and the creativity of the development teams, is at a point way beyond what the audience is actually able to deal with. So very often when you're criticizing a game, sometimes it now the implication is it's our fault that it sucks.
Nice.
Or some focus tester. I mean, that was why I was so excited the other day when Lauren was talking about how
Area 51, it's our fault.
Well, no. About how focus testing can be detrimental to the overall vision of a game. Anyway, excellent first opening there. When we come back in just a moment, we will have all sorts of news, including Nintendo talking about their DLC stuff, the new PC Gaming Alliance, and possible confirmation of Portal 2. Stick around. We'll be right back. back. And real quickly, two things that I was surprised I didn't hear come out of anybody's mouth during that discussion of high points of GDC. First one, Far Cry 2, which evidently no one really looked at. But I spent 10 minutes watching someone playing it while I did my little quick whirlwind tour through the floor, and I was very, very, very impressed. The engine looks really good. The combat looked smooth.
Better than Crysis?
I don't just... on par. It's in the ballpark, and
it's only called Far Cry 2 because they own the IP, basically, right? I mean, it has nothing to do with the original game.
No, it doesn't. And my concern was very deep for that because I thought, wow, they're just going to make another shooter and slap this name on there. And you know what? Good on them for making a good engine, and good on them for at least having the fundamental tenets of a shooter that could have a good game around it.
The idea of there being these characters and you can be any one of them, and the ones you don't choose are your buddies. I think that there's some sort of interesting character management stuff.
I will say though, it does sort of raise that Resident Evil 5 specter a little bit. I know that's contentious.
Well, because it's set in Africa?
Not just because it's set in Africa. I mean, the idea is that essentially the story, such as it is Yojimbo, ultimately. You know, you're playing both sides against the middle to navigate. There's effectively three factions, two of which are sort of violent paramilitary factions. The villain is selling arms to both sides. And so in order to get to the villain, you have to befriend mercenaries, play both sides against each other, work with the underground to get anti-malarial drugs that you need to sort of keep you alive. And I couldn't figure out how to articulate this to Clint Hawking, the producer of the game.
Creative director
of the game. When I was talking to him about it, and I think I said it to him, but I kind of had to make a joke of it because I couldn't quite tackle it seriously. But there's something about it that had the feel of we had to burn the village in order to save it. And I'll just put it like that. Like there's just
gotta break some eggs to make.
I'm not horrified by it, but it does make me feel weird. And then I have to ask myself, well, would I feel weird if this was set in, I don't know, Chechnya or Outer Covenant somewhere? I don't know, but it does give me pause.
I mean, it's interesting to me. It was exciting for me because of our certain relationship restrictions. I haven't had a lot of exposure to Far Cry 2, and I was like, wow, this is cool. I'd like to see more of it.
You have relationship restrictions?
I like the way you describe that.
Yeah. And then secondly, the other one that has surprised me for not coming up was APB, because the APB demonstration...
in fact, last time I was on the show, we talked about APB, and we all wrote it off as being done and finished and not happening.
Yeah, the one you might want to write off from what I hear is Huxley, but APB evidently looks sharp, right? I mean,
it looks like GTA 4-ish.
I thought Crackdown.
But it's not social.
Not really Crackdown. I wouldn't call it.
But also, don't call it an MMO.
But not looks Crackdown in visuals, but looks Crackdown in jump in, fuck around, do what you want to, and just go wild.
So wait, it's not an MMO?
He said he thinks that's a misnomer. He's trying to reclaim the term, called an MOG, multiplayer online game, but it's semantics. It's an MMO.
All right,
but it's not a Momorpaga?
A what?
That's what Zero Punctuation calls MMORPGs.
Yeah.
It's a Mogta.
A Mogta. All right, anyway, so let's...
multiplayer online GTA, right?
Basically.
Mogta.
Let's jump into some news real quickly here. First up from the Wired blog, we have a story from Chris Kohler, who talks about his... digging into the Wi-Fi connection service and their announcement that they will have a new service called Pay and Play, where you will be able to subscribe on a game-by-game basis to certain titles. It appears that this will be a Wii thing initially because you will be paying for it with Wii points, but there's also implication that could also come to your DS Lite. Paying for online on the Wii?
To me, this smacks of Animal Crossing. I think it's going to be. I think it's going to be Animal Crossing that costs money.
Well, that's a good connection. That's a bad connection of the dots, actually.
I think it makes sense because if it's an whatever that is, friendship game, then you'll be buying your furniture and shit. I think we'll see.
How do you feel about paying for a service that's a friend code based?
I really liked Animal Crossing.
I really like Animal Crossing.
If it's worth to me what they're charging, then yeah.
Maybe you're paying not to have friend codes. How much would you pay to not have a friend code?
See, that's really sinister. The last 2 years have all been about pissing you off, so you'll pay to not be anymore.
Yeah.
But here's the thing: what are you paying for
in Animal Crossing?
No, in this thing. Maybe I'm slow or drunk, and what are you paying
server
for?
fees? I think
you're paying for the ability to play the game online in a multiplayer environment.
So it's like Xbox Live.
It's like Xbox Live, but
it's like per game.
Per game.
But what's interesting though is that we've heard nothing about this in relation to either Smash Brothers
Nope.
or Mario Kart, which assumedly would be the two most enthusiastically and
Right,
most
but
played online
you
games.
expect to pay money to play those online, but you would expect to pay money to play a persistent world online.
Right,
Right,
they
I mean,
have
that's
to make
what
a
really-
clear distinction, because if the two big multiplayer racing and fighting games aren't being paid for, then
Right.
they'd have to make it pretty clear why you're paying for these other things.
Right.
Yeah.
And that's where Chris speculated. Chris speculated it would be an MMO sort of thing. In Animal Crossing, you could very easily see how that's persistent world-based, becomes an MMO.
We'll probably
MMO
learn
sort
more
of
at
thing.
E3.
I would bet that would be one of those ones Reggie was talking about. Also, on the download tip for the Wii, you'll soon be able to have downloadable add-on content on the Wii.
Guitar Hero, Rock Band.
Well, that's interesting because that was what Chris pointed out.
About
Was
time.
that that the Wii version of Guitar Hero 3 was the one version that doesn't currently let you download any songs. But where are they going to put this stuff? I mean, how are they? We were talking during the break. Go ahead.
What was I saying during the break?
You were talking about how are they going to handle the downloadable games and the memory card restrictions and the SD card thing.
Well, and
it's an issue.
And this is worse than downloadable games if it's DLC, because if it's a Rock Band or a Guitar Hero and download a lot of content, you're going to have to swap that off the SD card onto the machine in order to play the songs. And this is, I mean, at a certain point, like, this is insane. Like, what is Nintendo thinking? I mean, are they that concerned about piracy that they're going to undermine and destroy the consumer experience? That makes no sense.
They could have a solution. There could be some other drive thing that comes out. I mean,
Some other drive thing.
It isn't beyond Nintendo to release baffling peripherals like the N64 expansion pack that splinters the market. They've done it before.
All right. John, what was one of the first? You were when you were in the UK. You worked on a Specky magazine, right?
No, but I mean, I remember them all, yeah.
Oh, you remember all that stuff? So one thing that's very fascinating to me about especially the European market is how certain old retro classic platforms like that have such staying power.
Commodore 64? It's huge.
And it's coming to the
There are
virtual
people
console.
that would walk over glass to be able to play Iridium and Paradroid on anything.
Impossible Mission was C64.
Yeah,
right?
that was
But isn't the
exclusive.
C64 channel currently exclusive to Europe?
Yes, that's what I'm saying. That's why I introduced it as part of Europe. I mean, this is something that's coming just to Europe because I wanted to take the next question, which was that stuff has not caught on in the United States before. How much?
C64 had a presence here.
Oh, it had a presence.
I mean,
but
it's not like this is like
Did my house.
Amstrad or Spectrum or something that really
All
never
right.
took off here, or
All right.
even ST.
But John, you can admit it, like Amiga channel, you want it.
I want Amiga.
Sinclair,
Some great.
you want it.
Yeah.
So why aren't they going to bring this to? Why are they not talking about bringing it to North America right now?
I think it'll come eventually.
They don't. You heard what he said about Reggie. Reggie does not want to drive demand for the Wii when they haven't allocated it. They know that so much demand for Commodore 64 games here.
Of course.
Yeah. It would implode. Riots outside the Nintendo World Store.
So we were talking earlier about the power or the potential computing or the hardware power of the Wii. Interestingly enough, in a discussion this at the GDC, the Crystal Tools, which is the internal engine name for the Final Fantasy engine, was revealed to be supported, fully supported on the Wii.
No.
yeah.
Brian and I were at this incredibly boring talk.
So,
my
so this is
God.
the white. This was the white engine talk.
Yeah,
was the white-
basically the white engine's now called Crystal Tools.
Okay, so
That's what we learned, and they could have ended it right there because that's all we really
Well,
got
okay,
out of that.
and although it's not currently functioning, they do hope to implement it across.
Yeah,
Wii.
like it wasn't even on the slide.
Right. They hope to scale it down to where they can use the same tools for Wii
the Wii.
development.
Okay, so when Murata said it was a secret, what he meant was that it was a secret that some of the things are going to work, but
Right. And the other possible news was that the new MMO that they announced without no title,
Yeah.
the successor to Final Fantasy XI, will also use crystal
yeah.
tools. Yeah.
interesting. So Insomniac also on the there's lots of internet related news coming out of GDC this week, and Insomniac has announced that they're starting a new initiative, because that's what they call it, the Nocturnal Initiative, where anyone can download the tools that they have currently made available to get developers to share the foundation. This is their quote: foundation code and techniques across company boundaries. So this is the sort of stuff that you actually expect out of GDC, right? Mm-hmm. Developers reaching out to work with other developers.
Hey, it's obviously Insomniac's PS3 games look really good. A lot of third parties don't. If it can help out,
this is their tools.
Yeah.
They're going open source on the guts of.
Well, at DICE, the two guys from Insomniac gave a huge speech about how important it is to make your own tools. So they're empowering other people.
Yeah,
I think it's
and buy their tools.
Yeah, and
Right.
there's Fire Engine that is a more of a Sony PlayStation initiative. There's PlayStation Edge, which I think is the same engine that Codemasters use.
But these tools are just not for PS3. You can use these to develop for 360 as well.
I think for Fire Engine that's true. I think,
but for this stuff that Insomniac's doing, like they actually said you can use this for other stuff. I mean, there are parts specifically to get the game working on PS3. Obviously, transfer stuff over, but you can use these tools for.
I think it's a good thing. I mean,
if I heard them correctly,
Sony needs to help third parties make better games.
Absolutely.
The bottom line. And so anything that they can do along those lines, and there's a friend of mine who works at a division of PlayStation, and there's something that they've got going in one of their games, and they're going to make that available too. It's not like gaming related, but it's part of a game, and I think it's the kind of stuff that really makes sense to disseminate, and I think you're only going to see more of that from Sony, at the very least until they sort of feel they're in a dominant position, and then maybe they'll get arrogant again.
GDC features a whole lot of collaboration, but this one might be the biggest collaborative story of the entire week. Activision, Microsoft, Epic, NVIDIA, AMD, Intel, Dell, Acer, Alienware, and Gateway revealed the heavily rumored from last week PC Gaming Alliance. So, John, you're not...
Wait, was Microsoft...
Well, John...
Was Microsoft part of that?
Yeah.
Yes, they are part of that.
Because Game for Windows was such a huge roaring success. Now they're teaming up with a bunch of other people who are hopelessly feeling that they might be able to rescue it.
Is this the ripcord? Is it an attempt at the ripcord? Is the second parachute?
It's someone flailing around for the ripcord, right?
Ripcord for Games for Windows?
Yes, that's what I was asking. I mean, well, so you seem to think it was?
It's a different sort of initiative. I mean, and unfortunately, it's not clear exactly what it is. I mean, the impression I get is that they're trying to, there's a spokesperson or a set of spokespeople who evangelize PlayStation 3, and the same thing for Nintendo, and the same thing for Xbox, but it's more decentralized on the PC, and they want to bring some of that to it. The thing that I think is funny, and I brought this up in my interview with John Shapper, because Games for Windows Live falls under his bailiwick, and I said to him, so this whole PC Gamers Alliance and that kind of thing, you're trying to evangelize and correct misinformation about the health of the PC business. And I said, but it would seem from the comments that Mark Rain is making about the state of the PC business, and he makes one of your biggest games, from the statements that Peter Molyneux is making about the health of the PC business, and he's a Microsoft employee, that you guys have an internal evangelizing problem that you need to deal with, because your own people don't seem to believe in the strength of the PC business. Don't you kind of need to deal with that before you start going out of house? I mean, they can't even get the story straight in their own company.
And I think the focus, I think everyone needs to take a step back with the PC market and start looking at where the heat really is, and pouring millions of dollars into code that only runs on a small fraction of the devices out there is fucking absurd, when you've got millions of people playing these web-based experiences which are accelerating in terms of the technology that they use. I mean, some of these web-based community games and the functionality, they're being iterated on daily.
Have you seen Sharky's favorite Raptor Safari thing?
Some of them are unbelievable.
Have you seen Raptor Safari?
I've heard of it. It's something.
This shit is crazy.
But John, you're kind of implying that Quake in a web browser is more important than Crysis to the PC market?
To the health of PC as a gaming platform?
That's what you're saying.
Absolutely.
It's engines that will run on, you grab any laptop on this floor, and I guarantee that the most of the games you would want to play on PC won't run on it, but every single web-based game will. Yeah. And that's the important thing.
But so was Microsoft talking about that here, or no? They're talking about video cards and hardware.
What they're still doing is trying to make everyone feel comfortable about Unreal Tournament.
Dual SLI cards.
Yeah, not selling very well. Well, what a surprise, because the box to run it costs $7,000.
And there are hardware solutions that are coming from some of the members of that alliance that are going to start to solve the whole thing that Rain's been talking about, the whole Intel integrated graphics chips that don't really do anything that's interesting to them. There are some solutions that are coming to that I think will be compelling. But I think you've diagnosed the situation, because in a weird way, what the Quake Zeros and the Battlefield Heroes of the world are doing is Microsoft at one end is trying to consoleize the PC with the Games for Windows and the Games for Windows Live initiative. But I think these things are consoleizing it, because at the end of the day, for the most part, unless you're a gorilla with Killzone 1, you don't make games that can't run on the machine, right? And that's what they're doing effectively, is making all these games that can't run on the machines that people have. And they're saying, you know what? Crazy idea. What if we made games that could run on the machines that people actually owned? seems to be working for Sims. Seems to be working for Mystery Case Files. Seems to be working for,
Look at all these web things like Dragon Fable. These games that are essentially Flash-based with lots of bolt-on things, and they're community-driven. They iterate on the code every week. They've got to a point now with some of these games where the forums are driving the creative decisions in the game because the development is so simple. Someone will propose a scenario in Dragon Fable, particularly. It looks like an anime game, and it's all done in Flash. And everyone will pile into the forum and say, this game should be, there should be a scenario where you do X, Y, and Z. And the community will, in general, say, that sounds like a great idea. So the team will go and say, all right, we're going to go build that. And a couple of weeks later, there it is. And it's like that, and that keeps people playing the game for a long period of time. And the technology is irrelevant. But then Crysis, which, I still haven't seen running on anything the way it's supposed to.
What I find weird about this initiative is, this is really the first I've heard about it. It had been rumored, but it wasn't mentioned at the keynote, which is strange to me as well.
Well, it was. Well, it's not strange. It was unveiled.
It isn't really. Microsoft are in it, but it's not their initiative.
Right. It was unveiled. It was unveiled under its own, as its own thing, as its own special thing.
Intel kind of the real push on this.
Actually, they've done a good job of pulling folks from all of their partners that are within it. Interestingly enough, though, I kind of agree with where you're coming from, John, and I think that Microsoft is definitely in there pushing along, and get some partners like Intel in there doing the same, and that they're still trying to find that kickstart for the PC gaming business that they thought Vista was going to give them. And Vista didn't give it to them. I mean, Vista has the performance index system, and they thought that was going to solve this problem of you being able to pick up a box and know it would run. This is a little number that's on the back of games for Windows games. It says it's needs a 5.5 or whatever to run, and you could look at your Vista game. But not enough people have bought Vista, especially not in games. I mean, there are even rumors flying all over that there's going to be a new replacement for Vista much sooner than people thought there would be.
Maybe they should use letter grades instead of numbers.
Yeah.
Ooh.
Andrew's nodding like very.
And games for Windows,
you pick up the box. Crysis is like F. You're like, I can't run this.
So to put the final nail in the coffin for your point, John, Windows Global Director Kevin, is that Unangst?
Unangst, I think.
Unangst. He actually responded to a question that Jeff Green threw him and said they are looking at the PC Gaming Alliance as, quote, a companion corollary effort to games for Windows. And then the director of or the head of the new initiative pointed out that the PC Gaming Alliance is not looking to put a logo on boxes. Oh, okay. Well, that's important.
Engo's point about the consolization thing is the root of the problem, and I think just they need to step back and look at what's really out there.
Well, the challenge for them, and I pressed John Shepard about this a lot in an interview, hopefully I'll run it next week or the week after, but is that, in a way, Microsoft's to blame for what's happened to the PC market with the success of Xbox. They did such a good job, even on the first Xbox, even though it was in third place globally, and an even better job on Xbox 360, of providing a path to console for traditional PC developers. And I think that, in tandem with the spread of HD TVs in the living room, not having to deal with still having to deal with patches, but not having to deal with patches in that kind of way, patches that, sort of work and run, put the game in and it works, all those things. The overall gaming experience for big chunks of the hardcore is now better in the living room than it is in the den, And so a lot of those guys, looking at the sales of the Call of Duty 4s and orange boxes and things like that, they've kind of gone to a certain extent, and they're not coming back.
I was interviewing Mark Rain, and he made almost a similar point to you, because he said that this kind of popped into his head when recently he noticed a lot of his developers were talking about playing Call of Duty 4, and then he heard them talking about the achievements, and he realized that they weren't playing on a PC. And these are guys who work at Epic, who theoretically, at least a lot of them would be PC heritage, making PC games still. They're playing console.
I did read that Valve said that Orange Box did sell better on PC than on console. And a lot of that's Steam. A lot of that's Steam, yeah. So the Steam versus Windows.
Well, you know what that means? We'll wrap it up. The PCGA needs to get Valve as a member and convince Valve to release their sales numbers so that they can prove that they're doing healthy. Because otherwise,
good luck with that.
At MPDs and say, "Oh, you suck."
Good luck with that.
Yeah, but Steam is kind of the opposite of the games for Windows banned on a box and then letter on a box, all that stuff. It's like they're different things.
In addition to taking the entire crew to the In-N-Out Burger, the Microsoft Blogger guys also got all the Blogger guys together for a little breakfast where they had Chris Satchel, Aaron Greenberg, and John Shepard available for questions, and there were some interesting points that came up out of them. First one I want to throw out there is for you, John. How do you feel about the part of the XNA community program that I hadn't seen come up before, which was that there will be no ESRB ratings or any sort of rating system like that at all on the XNA games?
But isn't there some kind of content management?
There is.
System?
The games,
like sliders for the content or something?
For cruelty. There were
and hostility, which are apparently different things, and I could not get Chris Satchel to explain.
Well, I want a
the
game with
difference.
cruelty but no hostility.
Here's the thing that's interesting is clearly it's Microsoft's own system.
Yeah.
Yes.
But I wonder how much it's Microsoft's own system completely versus being derived by a lot of the same principles that the ESRB itself uses to assign ratings.
Yeah.
But I think clearly the reason is that someone was going to have to pay to have the games rated.
Right, because games cost money to be rated.
And it wasn't clear that Microsoft was going to pay it, and it
No,
wasn't
of course
clear that
not.
developers
And
were going
there's
to pay
a
it.
user submission element to the rating. It's a community rating
yes,
system.
They're also
essentially.
putting us to work.
Right, and so the thing you have to ask yourself is what's going to happen when systems like this are rife for being punked. What happens if someone decides to take, the most horrific, just like Lemon Party, whatever, game, and then turn that into a thing, and then agree to sort of rate it up so it gets through the system.
They said in the keynote that they had some adverb they put on the word offensive, but or adjective rather. Adverb? I don't know. It's been a long time since grade school. But they said that if a game was extremely offensive, might have been what they said, that would be an adverb, and it's an LY, that the game wouldn't be allowed in the system. So who knows where they draw that line, but it's clearly they'll know it when they see it.
But they still haven't said whether it's just that's the community standard or they themselves do a final bit of review.
We also talked about the demise of HD DVD, its potential impact on the perception of the 360, and the guys talked to that. They said that bullet points were that Microsoft doesn't care about the Blu-ray at this time. Interesting. That Xbox 360 is a game machine, not a movie player. That if you must watch movies on it,
Except
there's
when you're
always
downloading the movies, right?
Right. Except if you must watch movies, there's always Video Marketplace. And then somehow I love how they brought out the stat that there was only a 3% attach rate for the HD DVD add-on anyway. Not like anybody bought the damn thing.
Well, here's going down to $50. So fire sale.
$50? What? $50 more than it's worth?
Dude, just put it in the same landfill with the ET cartridges and be done with it. Why are you trying to sell this lemon? Stop.
Seriously. Then also they talked about the hard drive upgrade issue and also how they feel that this speaks to their problem with not wanting to have user-generated content just out in the wild on live. And they said that the UT3 issue is something they're working on, and that it also points out how Microsoft cares more about the security of their system than their competitors, and that's for a good reason. Well, it's sounding very noble, right? And also, on the downloadable tip, they talked about when Microsoft said that they meant exclusive with regard to Grand Theft Auto 4 content, that the Grand Theft Auto content that you'll be getting is going to be significantly larger than you have thought it would be when you think of downloadable content. I do that in air quotes.
I have an addition here. This is the hot rumor going around that this content is also going to be considerably more expensive than you've ever spent. I think it's worth it. I mean,
presumably more than $30 is what they're saying.
Right. I mean, if it's worth it, it's worth it. But I just think people need to prepare themselves for that.
I think if it's it's 8 hours of gameplay or whatever. Hey, for something made by Rockstar for GTA 4, that's because you're not going to get a sequel for how long?
For each dollar above 30, how much does the score go down for the additional content?
I don't know. We'll see. We've never experienced sticker shock on DLC, really, so it'll be a new experience.
I would say that what you're saying at least aligns with what they were talking about, because they compared it to Vice City and San Andreas being essentially expansions of Grand Theft Auto 3, and that you should think of this upcoming DLC for Grand Theft Auto 4 in the same way.
Bullshit.
By the way, do we know who's making the DLC?
The presumption is that
Rockstar North.
Rockstar North's doing
But
it.
have we ever been told that officially?
No.
Just throwing that out there. I realize that I have no idea one way or the other.
Interesting.
I can't imagine they will.
Well, remember, there is, when they say, think of
studios.
San Andreas and this other stuff, they keep telling us no, but there was a borough that was left out of the game. For all you Wu-Tang fans out there, Shaolin is not represented. Staten Island's not in the game. Could Staten Island be the DLC?
I don't know.
That's cool.
They did wrap it up by saying that if this is a successful endeavor that they have with downloadable content, that could be the way to for the foreseeable future deliver more expansion packs.
But that's awesome. We're talking about GTA, something that people really care about. I mean, I don't think that's a good benchmark for this. I mean, it has to be something quadruple A like at GTA in order to sell that many at such a high price. I don't know.
I think Microsoft spent $50 million for this, allegedly. So I think if they're smart, they will market this like the sequel almost. It's 6 months.
Have commercials and stuff.
I think you'll see. I think you'll see them.
Yeah,
really.
Absolutely.
And it's smart. It's what they should do.
On the Sony side of the world, Mr. Harrison, that's Sony's head of worldwide studios, has interestingly enough expressed frustration with the homeland, or Japan, over their I guess I'd call it maybe like their reluctance to acknowledge the rise of social gaming and the sort of stuff that has made the Wii so popular. He said in his quote, "It's a very interesting and frustrating thing for me to experience because I've been banging the drum about social gaming for a long time with SingStar, iToy, and Buzz, and our Japanese colleagues said that there's no such thing as social gaming in Japan. People do not play games on the same sofa together in each other's homes. It will never happen." And then along comes the Wii. So he's basically acknowledging that they were behind the curve. But this is like 2 years too late, right?
Well,
we're going to see some very interesting Sony politics out loud right now.
Yeah.
Because he would never have done that previously.
It's
I was
shocking.
gonna say slamming your boss.
And I think
he's not slamming Kaz. Other than the fact that SCA was slow to pick up Buzz and iToy.
Yeah.
You know what I'm saying?
From what I've heard in the community, these are indicative of what Japanese developers and publishers think about. And I've heard this from multiple people that cross-game invites to Japanese developers and publishers are rude. The idea that someone would send you an invite in my game to go play someone else's game was considered rude in Japan, which is crazy, But hey, maybe that's why we don't have them.
Mm-hmm.
No, I mean, and that's why last year is the Wii was up and PS3 was tanking and all this stuff, and I said, look, one of the things that came up in various discussions was that Nintendo deserves a lot of applause for what they've done with the Wii because they baked in the social gaming elements, right into the device. Same thing with Microsoft and Xbox Live, but not to overlook what Phil and his team over at SCE had pioneered before he became the head of Worldwide Studio. SingStar,
the iToy,
Buzz, all of that stuff, was important. That they had done a lot of that work, and that's why I think that to the extent that the hardware guys can sort out their problems and get things together, that the Sony has the DNA, especially now that Phil is running Worldwide Studio, to get the kind of experiences that can get them to the mass market once they work out the price. And for Microsoft, that's going to be a challenge.
Wii Fit's got to be driving them crazy. I mean, when was iToy Kinetic? 2-3 years ago?
Oh, man.
But that's,
3 years
that's
ago.
the point, that there is something that actually came out and it didn't hit. So it's not. It couldn't just be a case of.
But it did hit in
who's
Europe,
behind
and it didn't get any marketing or PR support in the US at all. I mean, no iToy stuff has.
I was thinking
who was the head of sales and marketing
back then?
back then?
Yeah, it's big. There's been a big shift.
That's an interesting question,
The
John.
same
Why?
person's running the company now.
Yeah.
I mean, the difference is now there's much more of a global initiative. SingStar is definitely, they don't have a choice now.
Yeah.
That's a global initiative. They have to make that work. But before, on a per territory basis, you really could decide. They couldn't force the individual territories to take something that had been developed in another territory.
Yeah.
The difference is now PS2 and PSP games can still be greenlit on a per territory basis.
Yeah.
PS3 games cannot be. That stuff gets decided much further up, and there has to be a belief that it's going to succeed in at least two territories.
Yeah.
And we're talking about be able to get more casual people, and I see the PSI, the iToy, whatever. It's such a tool to do that, but it's sad that we haven't seen that killer app for that peripheral yet.
The problem is I have judgment's so limited.
Yeah, and it's it's so hardcore, but I'm just waiting for it's so much potential in that little device, but.
How much was Eye of Judgment, the pack? Was it
$69.99?
So it was $10 more than a game.
Yeah, and it's
if they really want to take this idea, they need to stick the Eye in the box with the PS3.
And playing Burnout every night, as I have, everyone who has
it's great.
cameras, it's great. It's really cool.
But it doesn't make you go buy.
No,
like
it
that.
doesn't. You wouldn't
it's
go
a great
buy it.
addition,
Right,
but
you wouldn't buy it
don't
for
have
that.
that one game
Yeah.
with the Wii Fit with the Wii board.
It needs to be the PS3's sensor bar thing that you
Yeah.
just when you get it out of the box, it's there and you can use it in anything.
That's a great idea.
The challenge is that's really not Sony's philosophy. Of the three, that's really Nintendo.
But is that the
Sony's thing is more like SingStar, iToy, and Buzz, where we'll make software that's compelling enough that you'll buy it with the peripheral, that they'll buy the peripheral for that reason. And that worked in Europe.
Yeah.
That hasn't been proven here to that same extent.
We're talking about iToy in the box, and it's February 22nd, and we still don't have DualShocks available, or whatever.
Brian and I broke down.
We literally
PS3
just got them
shop.
today.
We broke down.
I saw it on your desk.
We imported it because all our friends have them for Burnout. We're like, I gotta get one.
And
just got them today.
I mean, there's another disappointment. I honestly thought that somewhere during GDC we'd hear announcement of the next PS3 pack.
GTA 4. It'll be out by GTA 4.
Well, it'll be out the day that Gran Turismo 4 Prologue comes out, which is
5
But there's so many North American games already that have had it patched in, and the support is good, and it's fun to play with. What on God's green earth are they dragging their heels with over that? Do you
Software.
Yeah.
But it's there.
Well, there's
sell me a controller. Anyway, you talked about getting more people into the game space in the casual market. The indie games that we just talked to earlier about being the new battlegrounds for the console war took an interesting twist. Great story by Brian Crescenti that he broke this morning out of GDC, which was that. It's a rumor, but according to sources at a couple of indie developers, Microsoft has slashed in half the royalties that they're paying on their arcade games. Typically, small developers directly affected by the cut told Kotaku that the once generous royalty share, which was 70%, had been in the past few months cut to 35%. Microsoft did respond to Kotaku's request for a comment, but it's a very political response.
With a letter from their lawyer.
Yeah, I mean, you're going to love it. I mean, basically, they're not denying it, so you have to say there must be some element of truth to it. It
says hot talk.
Xbox Live Arcade has long been known as the premier destination for digitally distributed or original and classic games, making a very appealing platform for game developers.
Get to the point.
We don't disclose details of our business contracts, but we can tell you is that we work closely with all of our partners to provide the Xbox 360 community with the best entertainment possible while making publishing a title on Xbox Live Arcade an attractive prospect. By the way, however attractive it is, the developers in question told Brian that they were going to go work on the PlayStation Network.
Well, I can't say I'm surprised. I don't think.
I mean, that's cutting it in half. That's big.
Yeah,
maybe 70 wasn't the right number for them.
But it is the same week that they announced that people can pay money in the Creators Club to make games for them.
So maybe these developers will drop down to the XNA level and start doing their games in XNA.
Slash at that level, it's got to have been that the assumption they made about the number of these things they were going to sell was so tremendously lower than it ended up being.
That they were just giving away money.
They were giving away an enormous amount of
chunk
money.
Of change.
I think it's actually the opposite. Don't you think that they must think that they've succeeded enough in whatever their corporate objectives were with Xbox Live that now they can say, we can change the terms now.
I think it's a combination
that we're
of both.
Effectively the only real game in town. For
they're not the only game in town.
We don't know what the royalty rules are on PSN or WiiWare, and maybe they realize, hey, we're giving away the farm here.
Yeah.
Well, I think that part of it is that they didn't feel the need to incentivize really, really attracting the developers to the platform monetarily, that there are other appeals now. And you can see that.
It's a bizarre assumption because when you talk to developers about the economics of Live, they're saying $300,000 or so to develop a title. Sales of 100,000 are sort of, decent. That's around where you sort of net out. So that's not necessarily a ton of profit that's sort of built into it relative to the effort. There's not a ton of coverage that goes on in whether it's enthusiast outlets or mainstream outlets. There's not a ton of information. Microsoft does not do a lot of the way of NPR. And Sony, the same thing is true even for Sony's own titles.
Oh, that's very true.
And ultimately what all of them are doing, and it'll be interesting to see what Nintendo does, I expect Nintendo will be no different, is that ultimately they're pushing the brand and not any one individual title. And so to me, to sort of like, with all of those realities to now on top of it slash the royalty, I mean, to me, if I were them, I would have ridden out this generation at that royalty and then switch it up the next time around.
In their PR earlier this week, they announced that unearthly number of Microsoft points that people have bought. What was it? Does anyone remember what it was off the top of their head? It was unfathomable.
Millions and millions.
It was millions and millions and millions of
Quick,
points.
Arnott, what's the conversion? How many dollars is that?
You know I don't know. You know I don't.
Also, millions and millions and millions.
It was millions. It was millions and millions of dollars, which I think that definitely emboldened them to take steps like this. Definitely some more DLC coming, since we've been talking about DLC. Halo 3 has a new map coming. It's called Ghost Town. It's going to be part of the forthcoming Legendary Map Pack. It's very infantry oriented. There's also more Warhawk DLC coming,
and rumored single player.
That was what I was getting to.
No, the rumor is that I think that they would consider making a full single-player game, not that you would download as
we speculated on this like a year ago.
I know.
That's great if they're going to do that. I would play the crap out of that.
So that would be thrilled by all that, and
I'm really glad that they're keeping the flow of that, because we talked about this a long time ago. That the real crime with Warhawk would be to let it die on the vine, and the fact that they're keeping people like interested by drip feeding this stuff out constantly, that's going to be kind of the constant. It's kind of the Counter-Strike of PS3 in a lot of ways. Mm-hmm. The game people will always go back to.
Absolutely. In what might be the best unintentional slip-up of the entire show, in an interview with G4 Television lead designer for Portal, Kim Swift, noted that I believe Doug Lombardi, who is our lead marketing director at Valve, has announced Portal 2.
But he hadn't.
Except that he hadn't. Oops.
So it was like a reverse Shane Kim.
I mean, did anybody think they weren't going to announce Portal 2?
Did you see the queue, by the way, to get into the Portal post-mortem at GDC? It was unbelievable. And Andrew pointed to these. So give me more. Check out GFW Radio, because on GFW Radio we have
Eric and Kim.
Oh, we have Eric and Kim.
Whoa.
And do they talk about Portal 2?
Not really, but
Are they hilarious?
Very.
All right, so there you go. You should definitely check out some GFW Radio. Besides,
I think the line is, you'll have to wait and hear it yourself.
that's right. Check it out on the Brodeo. 7.5.
Before we get to Steven's deep thought, I realize I have two small GD things I need to mention.
Sure.
First of all, Mark McDonald, he came and taped one of yours for us last night with Dennis Dyack, the big rivalry, the showdown, but Mark hadn't played it, and he did play it today, and Brian and I called him to see if Mark McDonald still thought that Too Human was terrible. And what did he tell you, Brian? He
was very optimistic. Gave it, according to Skip, gave it thumbs up. Liked the combat.
There was a word used.
I heard the word excellent. Now I'm hearing this secondhand from David Ellis. Yeah. I heard excellent was in terms of the combat.
You know, Microsoft are using you as a conversation point when they talk about Too
Even
Human.
Shane likes Too Human.
I've heard that from 3 different Microsoft people this week.
I'm glad I could be of service. My other comment was last night at a Vivendi party. This gentleman, this doctor, I forget his real name. His internet handle is Modus. Came up to me and he.
Modus.
I met him too. He's so cool.
Well. And he wanted to thank us because he likes the show, and he likes that we talk about the PS3 custom themes that he makes, that Brian uses.
Yes.
They're amazing.
They're absolutely amazing.
But we had never mentioned his name, so he wanted to say Modus on here, give some props because we love those things. And
we do.
Modus is the squiggly one? Is that him?
No, he
does all the custom themes.
He does complete custom
First
themes.
of all, did you ever see his Forza cars?
Oh, those are him too?
Holy shit, dude! His Forza cars.
But he's done some crazy
awesome.
stuff, from Metal Gear to Okami to just some really cool stuff.
That was all cool. But then the real bombshell is that Xbox Live and PC game. It's called Omega 5, which I haven't played. It's a shooter. Apparently, I need to play it because the first boss is named after me, and I thought that was really fun.
Wow, Shane!
Wow,
awesome!
Isn't that awesome?
That's so cool.
I just thought,
what's it called? Man God?
No.
If it was Man God, I would pay just to download it.
He was a really cool guy. I just want to give him some props. So that's me.
Awesome, Shane. So glad you're being in a game.
And as long as you brought up Modus, I just have to say, for all the folks who are listening who've come up to us during GDC and thanked us for the show and everything, you know what? It's so. I don't even have words. Whatever. We thank you so much for saying that, because we love doing the show, and hearing you guys come up to us and tell us how much you enjoy the show makes it all worthwhile. And that's that.
Yeah.
And that's all. I mean, that's that. It's that easy. And now, from the deep think tank.
Does this have some kind of theme music you're going to drop?
1515 Broadway.
1515 Broadway. The Stephen Datillo think tank brings you Steven's Theories, Part 2.
Yes, Part 2. So last time I was here, I threw out my theory of video game remakes. And the lights blink when I give my theory, because there's a lot of electricity in the air.
Ominous portent.
Yeah. So last time it was remakes, right? And my thing was that maybe we don't need as many sequels to franchises as we have, because there are these classics, and how about just bringing some of the classics back, polishing them up? So that was a bit contentious. People talked about that. So I got a new one for you. the current games I'm playing right now are Fire Emblem on the Wii, God of War on PSP. And if you know anything about Fire Emblem, it's not really a home console game. It's a portable game, right? If you know anything about God of War, it's a console game. It's not a portable game. And I realize that I'm playing things completely inverted. And it's got me thinking about when should a game be portable, when should a game be on the console, and why do we have those distinctions? Because I'm thinking about other forms of entertainment, and I realized that there was a time that I could only go to the movie, see a movie in a movie theater. Then I could also see a movie in my house. Now I can watch a movie anywhere. There was a time when I could only listen to music at home, and then they invented the Walkman however long ago, and then you could listen to music outside. And we probably all have at least some memory of one of those things being changed in our lives. Maybe it was phone calls, which is a little bit different, but there was a time when you only made phone calls in your house, and then the first time you were walking just somewhere and you were still on the phone with somebody. And I'm playing Fire Emblem on the Wii, and I don't really have time to play it because it's a really long game, and I'm 35 hours in, and I still got a long way to go. And I finished playing it on, or I put it down and I go somewhere, and I'm thinking, why do I still not have Fire Emblem with me? Fire Emblem should be in the palm of my hand all the time. Why is this game not with me? And then I'm playing God of War, and I'm like, wow, I never would have wanted to play an epic game in a portable because I would assume it wouldn't feel epic anymore. But the new God of War on PSP actually feels epic, even though it's on this little screen. So why are some games still only on the handheld? Why are some games still on the console? I understand the technological reasons. But are we reaching a point where it's going to be archaic to see a game only on one and not on the other? Is gaming kind of behind the rest of entertainment for having it set up in such a way that there are things you can only experience at home and there's things you can only experience when you're on the go? And are people going to start to demand, and are we going to get into a point in gaming history where we can actually play that same game anywhere we are? Is PlayStation Home kind of remote play rather than the tip of the spear to this whole new thing where games get where music, movies, TV, and everything else is, that you can experience the same content anywhere you go?
And the fidelity might just change. So yeah. I might listen to the latest song on my iPod through my earbuds, and I get one experience. I might listen to it through my PC, and my PC speakers get one experience, or I might take it home, throw it on my home theater, and get like a whole other experience.
Shane was raising his hand.
Well, I think that's a really good point.
It's just the most polite interjection he's ever made.
He knows not to mess with
I did raise my hand, and I think that's a really good point. And it reminds me of what we were talking about with Dennis about how people perceive their media and interact with their media and what you want out of your media. And that's happened in the last 5 years.
Yeah.
And I think remote play is like the bleeding edge of that, but it's not really useful. I mean, who really wants to play Lair? But Pixel Junk Monsters is a game maybe you would want to play remote play. And even though it was kind of a side thing that people laughed at, when they did show at Microsoft's keynote that you could put that XNA game on your Zune, it was silly, but it is what you're talking about, and it is forward-thinking, and I think that is where we're going, but it's very bleeding edge right now.
Okay, here's what we'll do to get the audience involved. On Wednesday, your job is to get with me. We'll look at the responses on boards.oneup.com, and we'll obviously Stephen will be back in New York, but we'll have some comments from Stephen on this topic during the beginning of the community segment in the second segment next week. And that's all, folks. GDC 08, the book is closed. Thank goodness. It's been a long week. For Andrew, Shane, and Guy, thank you very much.
Let's give it up to Skip also
Skip
for
amazing was
week.
here like all night.
By the way,
Unbelievable guest,
Andrew.
Guy
Unbelievable.
busted his ass, so way to go, Skipper.
My captain, my captain.
Way to go, brother. Awesome work. For Guy, thank you very much. Steven, great to see you.
Thanks.
Brian.
Pleasure.
Always. John. Always welcome.
I've
John,
bitten by the bug again. I want to do it again.
Oh, you like it? See, you do like it.
We have a chair waiting for you anytime that you want to come and join us.
Okay.
So this is Garnet. Thanks very much. We'll see you at boards.oneup.com. Until next week, we are Ghost.